So welcome back guys, we're back with another interesting story, which is on, what if Bella fell for Rosalie's toxic love? Before starting, don't forget to like and subscribe our channel for more such videos, so let's get started. There was always, and, it felt to her, would always be, a point at the end of each encounter where they had to separate, where one of them had to go. The practical justification for this, it was in order for neither to be found out. And Rosalie would never put herself in a position where she would be the one being prompted to leave. Despite all of the concessions she'd already made, and there were many, in order to get to this place, to this darkened, windowless bedroom where she currently lay, her lithe, slender body draped over the softer, smaller girl in a manner far too intimate, and truthfully, too loving to suggest that this had been a random or meaningless tryst. Yes, despite everything Rosalie had compromised to bring her to this very moment, she was still too proud to ever be asked to leave. Nor would she ever be the one asking to stay. Actually, it wasn't simply a matter of pride. It was also manipulation. She knew the power in this, knew the effect it had on Bella, the subtle, veiled rejection present in always being the one being left, always being the one wanting more. Basic economics, Rosalie thought, supply and demand. Flood the supply and you decrease the demand, and vice versa. And I am the vice versa. Rosalie wasn't actually interested in hurting Bella. In all honesty, it pained her to think of it, and God help anyone else who would ever dare to hurt or upset Bella. Her Bella Rosalie would rip their hearts out. Well, not literally, but she would destroy them, in words, or in deeds, or both. Rosalie Lillian Hale was a fearsome creature, extraordinarily beautiful, frighteningly intelligent, socially powerful, and wealthy beyond comprehension. And although she would admit this only to herself, she was never more grateful of her power than when she was with Bella. Because she loved Bella, she'd never really loved anyone before, aside from the standard family ties, but she knew she loved Bella. Actually, she knew she was in love with Bella. It was this strange full feeling she'd get in her chest, maybe her heart, she thought, whenever she was with her or thought of her. The feeling that would rise all the way into her throat. To the point where when Bella would look up at her with those sleepy, chocolate brown eyes, although one could hardly describe them as simply chocolate, Rosalie could see a million different shades of deep brown. Sparkling, endless. Rosalie could look into those eyes forever, she thought, but regardless, when Rosalie would lose herself in those eyes, or see Bella laugh, or cry, or sigh, or Jesus drink a cup of coffee, whatever, in these moments Rosalie would get this full feeling in her chest, okay, her heart, and it would get so indescribable, so huge, that Rosalie felt like she would burst. Feeling like she would burst, how cliché, Rosalie thought, but although Rosalie knew it was cliché, she knew that all clichés had to have been born from truths, and thus this was her truth. She was in love with Bella. And of course, Rosalie was fiercely protective of the few people she loved. So she thanked God that her beauty was breathtaking, her intelligence, although some might describe it more as cunning, was legendary, her bloodline was beyond blue, and her bank account was at least 9 digits before the decimal point. Because all of this gave her power, and she could use this power to protect Bella, her Bella. Not to shield her from the world. Rosalie didn't want that, and she wasn't naive in her mind. Character, strength, intelligence, all of it, really, could only be developed through some measure of adversity. Rosalie was just grateful to have the power to make sure that adversity didn't get out of hand. And, yes, to also destroy anyone that tried to, or successfully did, hurt Bella. But subversively, secretly, without anyone knowing, even, no, especially, Bella. Because that's how Rosalie operated, how she thought, how she felt, in secret, all of it. Nothing was more secret, of course, than the fact that she actually loved Bella. Was in love with Bella. And for now this fact was as much a secret to the beautiful girl underneath her as it was to everyone else. The beautiful girl who was at this moment, beginning to stir. Hey, Bella said quietly, intimately, as she stretched her arms over her head. She had been laying slightly on her left side, her body pressed tightly into Rosalie's as she had held the arm that draped gracefully over her. Spooning. Bella insisted on calling it, even though or probably because Rosalie hated the term. Now, as Bella stretched, she twisted her body to face Rosalie's and pressed up against her, making their bodies fully flush with each other. Bella exaggerated the stretch so that her nipples grazed Rosalie's, and Rosalie couldn't help but shudder. Bella was looking directly into her eyes, her gaze soft but serious. Rosalie pressed herself into Bella, moving her onto her back but keeping their bodies still flush, as Bella brought her arms down and wrapped them around Rosalie's neck. Rosalie slowly pushed herself onto her forearms, never breaking Bella's gaze or the contact between them from the waist down. She moved one leg slightly in between Bella's as she arched her back, both movements small enough to seem unintentional but still creating enough friction to elicit a tiny gasp out of Bella. Bella gently rubbed the nape of Rosalie's neck with one hand and brought the other to Rosalie's forehead, tracing a half C down the side of her face as she tucked an errant strand of hair behind the blonde's ear. Rosalie sighed, staring deeply into Bella's eyes without speaking, knowing just how long to go before the silence became unbearable. "Hey," Rosalie said back after a few seconds. Bella smiled. "I can't believe you're still here," she whispered as she traced a line from Rosalie's jaw down to the hollow of her throat, holding her delicate fingers there for a brief moment before bringing them up to Rosalie's cheek. She rubbed it softly with the back of her fingers as she spoke. "Please tell me I wasn't asleep for very long." "No, you weren't," Rosalie replied, a smirk appearing on her face. "What?" Bella chuckled. "Okay, how long did I sleep? I know it wasn't long because you'd never stick around if it was." Bella feigned irritation in her voice but continued to stroke Rosalie's cheek. "How rude," Rosalie replied in mock indignation, but with a tone that was soft and seductive. "Now you'll never know." "Rose." Bella used her nickname and spoke softly as well. All trace of joking was gone. She slipped her arms underneath Rosalie's and began to ghost her fingertips up and down her sides. Rosalie responded by slowly moving the leg that was in between Bella's. "Rose," Bella said again, this time her voice deeper and filled with want. Rosalie began flexing that certain muscle on her slender, perfectly toned thigh and pushing into Bella in slow, precise rhythm, once again moving her own arms back underneath Bella's and gathering the girl up, lifting her lower back slightly off the mattress as they began to rock back and forth. Bella cupped Rosalie's face with both hands and pulled her in for the kiss she couldn't wait any longer for. There was always, and, it felt to her, would always be a point at the end of each encounter where they had to separate, where one of them had to go. And Rosalie would never put herself in a position where she would be the one prompted to leave, but now, as Bella's soft, full lips met hers, as she moaned into Rosalie's mouth in a way that made Rosalie so weak with arousal she could barely hold Bella, now, as their tongues moved together in time with their bodies, increasing in pace as they grew wetter and wetter, now Rosalie felt that, as dangerous as it might be for her pride, that point of separation would have to wait. And she knew pride was never really the reason she was always first out the door, nor was it manipulation, it was fear. And as their breathing grew faster and this beautiful girl began again to moan her name, she wondered exactly how she had gotten to this point. Rosalie stilled their movements and pushed herself up so that she hovered over Bella, watching her reaction to the loss of friction lower down. Bella's lips were so swollen, so perfectly red, that Rosalie had to suppress a small moan as Bella bit down slightly on the lower one. Rosalie's eyes bore down on Bella's, and she searched them, not sure of what she was looking for. The eyes that looked back up at her were half-lidded in arousal, and filled with lust, desire, and something else, something Rosalie couldn't quite put her finger on. Bella held her gaze like no one else ever had. Most couldn't handle the intensity of Rosalie's stare. But Bella could. In fact, it almost felt like she could match it. Actually, it felt like Bella was searching her too. That Rosalie didn't know what Bella was looking for gave her pause, the uncertainty making her feel momentarily weak. Rosalie needed to own people, control them, know them, sense them and see them always clearer and more deeply than they could ever see her. That control she needed to have it, always to have it. Love, that wasn't something that Rosalie thought would ever enter into her equation. Love was for other people, simpler people, happier people, Rosalie thought. She wanted it, wanted to feel that free and that full and however else it had been described to her, but she had long since resigned herself to the idea that she was too broken for it. Platonic love was painful enough and best kept to a safe minimum. Romantic love, actually being in love, that was simply too foreign, too frightening, and too long forgotten for Rosalie to ever feel again, if she ever even had. Maybe years before, in the few blissful moments of early childhood before the pain began. Maybe that was what love felt like. But Rosalie had understood that she wouldn't know love, wouldn't know how to love, ever in her life. Unfortunately, Rosalie also knew that Bella had changed that. Bella made her weak, made her feel needy, desperate. And all of a sudden she found herself secretly in love with Bella. How would she ever cope with that? Her demented, surely deranged emotions would get the best of her, and she would be ruined. And Bella, no doubt Bella would of course love her back, wouldn't she? But it would be weak, and annoying, and suffocating. At least Rosalie could take solace in the knowledge that once Bella was in love with her, Rosalie would lose interest. But she didn't want to lose interest. How was that possible? How did she get to be so weak? How did she get to this place? This was an impending disaster. She would hurt Bella. Bella would hurt her. She was too messed up, too broken. Again with the clichés, she thought, my life is riddled with clichés. Too broken to love. She almost smiled at how ridiculous it sounded, how very Dr. Phil it all was. Plenty of people felt they suffered from the same affliction and were proven wrong, dragged out of their self-imposed isolation or dramatic moping and self-pity by some sassy wedding planner, or bully with a secret heart of gold, or some horse whisperer on a farm in Montana. Yeah, she'd seen the movies, whatever. It wasn't like she didn't believe in the possibility of this, but not for her. Yet here it was, happening right before her very eyes. Bella could never know, and Bella could never fall in love with her. She knew what it looked like when someone loved you. She'd seen it countless times. She had an ability to get people to fall in love with her more or less effortlessly. Maybe it was the beauty, or the body, or the money, or more likely, she knew, it was the fact that she was withholding, a mystery, never giving anyone as much of herself as they gave her. And they'd all try to change her. They'd all think that they'd be different. Rosalie was, in fact, so used to seeing this in others that she could recognize almost immediately when someone had fallen for her again. There would be this hopeful, longing look in their eyes, almost desperate. And that look usually came first during or right after sex, as Rosalie hovered over them, staring deeply into them much like she was doing to Bella at this moment. And always when she saw it, Rosalie's attraction would die, her interest would be gone, and she'd brace herself for the coming weeks of pleading phone calls, or cold shoulders, or frustrated screams and insults. She didn't welcome this, and she wasn't cruel to any of them. In fact, she felt badly every time it happened, because it was just one more nail in her coffin, one more instance that proved to her that she was indeed dead inside. She'd given up berating herself about not being able to feel long ago. After a few years of self-torture, she realized it was pointless. And so she made peace with who she was. But yes, she knew what it looked like when someone loved her. And she knew what that would entail. What would happen? She also remembered what happened when she let herself love someone. And that was even worse. The numbing weight of disinterest that dragged on her when someone looked at her with love. That felt frustrating, that felt bad. But it couldn't hold a candle to how it had felt when the roles were reversed. So why, as she looked down at Bella right now, did it feel different? Not radically so, but different. She could not, let Bella fall in love with her. Strange as it sounded, she didn't want to lose Bella. She didn't want to look at her the way she looked at everyone else. She didn't want Bella to be like everyone else. No, Bella could never be allowed to love her. It would ruin everything. After tonight, it would be over. Rosalie needed to be the predator that she knew she was. She needed to block out her own feelings and protect herself. She needed to put a stop to this nonsense. Right now. But looking down at Bella, she lost her resolve. Okay, fine. Maybe just one more time, she told herself. One more time. Bella swallowed her breath but continued to stare right back at Rosalie, her dark eyes probing into Rosalie's own. Rosalie could see in them the lust and the desire. That didn't surprise her. But there was something else. Rosalie felt a current of adrenaline rush through her, rushing hot and tingly and strange, as she realized what she was seeing. It was love. She could see the love in Bella's eyes. Great, it's already too late. But Rosalie couldn't stop herself. This was different than she imagined. She saw love in Bella's eyes. Or maybe it was a mistake, maybe it wasn't love. God knows I have an ego, Rosalie mused. Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit. She's not in love with me, that's not love. She just wants me. Everyone wants me. But the look in Bella's eyes was different. It didn't look weak or desperate or needy. It looked like something she'd never seen before. Please don't let it be love, she silently begged to the God she hoped existed. God. But those eyes. Rosalie swallowed her own breath, realizing that she'd actually felt something. She'd felt arousal, right? No, she knew what arousal felt like, and this went way beyond that. It surely must just be some version of that electricity or adrenaline that Bella always gave her because Bella was hot and Rosalie wanted her. No, this was something much stronger, like adrenaline times a million. What was it? Whatever it was, she couldn't believe she'd actually felt something so strong. She had felt the bigger picture. Love. For Bella already. She already knew she was probably in love with her. But this? It was like being lost at sea, stranded on a life raft, sunburnt and dehydrated beyond rational thought, with nothing left to feel but your own thirst. That thirst was so strong that it overrode everything else. She felt that thirst for Bella, that weird electrical charge that made her want to consume Bella, to ravage her body and own her mind and spend every waking hour of the rest of her life taking her. And this truly frightened Rosalie. She felt so out of control. Part of her wanted to flee immediately, to run for the safety of her own apartment, her own, managed, controlled existence. But she was smart enough not to act on that fear. She couldn't act on that fear, because it was balanced with the strange joy of just realizing that something had happened to her that she hadn't predicted. That Bella did something to her that no one had yet to do. And whatever it was, it felt good. It felt so good. Rosalie licked her lips, a small but real grin gracing her features. Shit, she mused, what is she doing to me? The weight of her body was absorbed fully by Bella as Rosalie brought herself down, releasing what she realized was the death grip she'd held on Bella's sheets. She couldn't bear to break eye contact with Bella. The feelings that gaze was giving her felt like little bumps of cocaine. She held it even as she leant in to nip Bella's lower lip gently. Bella leaned into her, hoping for more contact, and muffled a groan as Rosalie pulled away. She placed each hand on the sides of Bella's perfect breasts, quickly ghosting a thumb over each hardened nipple, already pebbled to perfection, before slowly running her hands from Bella's sides and up her arms, moving them in the direction of above Bella's head. She was losing control. So soft, Rosalie whispered. So beautiful. God, she was so soft. Rosalie was hard, all tight, toned muscle, perfectly shaped, perfectly cut. Perfect. But hard, so hard, powerful, impenetrable, unyielding. But Bella was soft. She was so soft, she felt so fragile in Rosalie's arms, so delicate, almost breakable. But God, so soft. Soft felt so good. She felt so good. You feel so good, Rosalie husked, the words slipping off her tongue before she even realized they'd been forming. So fucking good, she moaned, as her hands roamed over the softness of Bella's arms and up to the delicate skin of her wrists. Bella responded by pressing herself as hard as she could into Rosalie from beneath her, clearly trying to roll her over. This is so cute, Rosalie thought. Bella trying to dominate me again, trying to have her way with me. Rosalie pinned Bella's wrists above her and leaned in to kiss her nose. Bella tried in vain to once again to capture her in a kiss, and her lips formed into a pout as she let out a puff of air in frustration when Rosalie pulled away. So cute, Rosalie mused, but when Bella bit her lip again, the tingles shot right down to Rosalie's core, the strongest ones yet. Rosalie moaned involuntarily, louder this time. So cute, but shit, so sexy. Bella continued to look deeply into Rosalie's own orbs, neither of them having broken contact once. It could have been 3 minutes that they absorbed each other's gazes, but it felt like 30. Bella's breath was erratic and heavy, and her pupils had darkened her eyes almost to the point of blackness. Rosalie could feel hard nipples brushing against her chest, and farther down, a heat and wetness that was pressed up against her thigh. Bella arched her back, further exposing her neck to Rosalie, begging for contact. Rosalie dipped down for a split second to nip at her pulse point. Bella shuddered, breathing Rosalie's name out in a way that sent whatever adrenaline thing Rosalie was feeling into overdrive. Was it just adrenaline? There was no way. It definitely wasn't standard arousal because of Bella. Rosalie knew that well, felt it plenty of times. And already arousal for Bella had been the strongest she'd ever felt in her 29 years. And this was actually even more intense, way more intense, and it felt heavier. It felt significant. It was like it hit her hard every time. And it made her want Bella in a way that she'd never wanted anyone or anything before. So sexy, she moaned as she met Bella's eyes again. They both gulped at the intensity of the moment. So fucking sexy, she gasped, and then for the second time that night, spoke before she realized what she was saying, whispering to Bella, "What are you doing to me?" Their lips crashed together and Bella began to kiss Rosalie deeply, sucking on her tongue in a way that made Rosalie almost collapse. Bella was forceful, dictating the pace of the kiss, taking charge. Rosalie never let anyone take charge, but with Bella it felt so good that she couldn't help herself. Bella rubbed herself on Rosalie aggressively, making her desires clearly known, as her soft mouth merged completely with Rosalie's. Rosalie felt like Bella was fucking her mouth with her tongue. Bella kissed her so deeply and in rhythm with her thrusts onto Rosalie's thigh. She freed one hand from Rosalie's grasp and dug her nails into Rosalie's upper back, digging in deeply before raking them down. Rosalie was so caught up in the sensation of the kiss, moaning into Bella's mouth as their tongues connected over and over, that she didn't notice where Bella's hand was headed until she felt 2 fingers run through her own folds. She gasped and quickly caught Bella by the wrist before she could go any farther. Bella moaned in frustration and broke the kiss, gasping and sucking in air. Rosalie brought the offending hand to her mouth and kissed the 2 fingertips. "Rosalie," Bella panted, "I need to touch you. I have to touch you. I have to fucking touch you. Please let me touch you." Aggressive, dirty-talking Bella was almost too much for Rosalie to refuse, but she'd had enough new experiences for one night, and as turned on as she was as Bella breathed desperately in her ear, the feel of those fingers had snapped Rosalie out of whatever trance she'd been in. No one took that kind of control over Rosalie, not until she said so. She didn't want anyone. What was she thinking? Well, of course she wanted them. She wanted Bella, but no way was she going to want Bella more than Bella wanted her. And right now, all she wanted to do was take Bella, to make her scream her name until she passed out. She wasn't in love with her, this was just a game, it had to be. Rosalie the predator was back. "Rosalie Rose, you have to let me touch you, you have to," Bella begged. Rosalie put a finger to Bella's lips to silence her. "Patience, Bella, patience. Patience is a virtue." Rosalie smirked and buried her head in Bella's neck, taking in the sweet smell of her sweat as she captured Bella's pulse point with her lips. She began to suck and Bella groaned loudly. "Shush," Rosalie growled seductively from her spot at Bella's neck. "You don't want to wake your roommates, Bella." "Then don't fucking do that. Don't fucking kiss me there," Bella husked in response. "As a matter of fact," she breathed, "you'd better not touch me there at all. You'd better not touch me anywhere." Rosalie abandoned her position even though her mark was not yet fully made, but she knew she'd return. She kissed Bella softly, pulling away as Bella tried to deepen it, and leaned over to her ear. She ran her tongue along the shell, and took the lobe into her mouth, letting it rest on her bottom lip as she puffed hot breaths. Bella shivered, and moaned, arching her back and thrusting faster onto Rosalie's thigh. "But Bella," she purred, far better at controlling her breathing than Bella, "I want to touch you everywhere." "Foo Rosalie," she moaned, very loudly, as Rosalie's fingers were instantly at her center, 2 slender fingers running slowly over her slit. "What if I want to touch you here?" Rosalie teased, her breath still hot on Bella's ear. "What if I wanted to do that?" "Stop fucking around, Rose, I can't take, oh my god." Bella squirmed as Rosalie's thumb pressed down on her clit right as she resumed her position at Bella's pulse point. Rosalie had that control back. Bella wanted her more than she wanted Bella, and she felt safe again, more like herself. She was about to tease her more, to pull her hand away and continue to torture her until she begged to be fucked, when Bella jerked forward and Rosalie's fingers slipped a little farther into her folds. She was so wet. For Rosalie. She was so wet for her. And just like that, something flipped in Rosalie's head, like an imaginary switch had been turned on, and she was all of a sudden filled with so much of that adrenaline from before that she could barely hold herself on top of Bella. So much for control, so much for Rosalie the predator, she groaned inwardly. This was so not a game. She wanted Bella with every fiber of her being, she wanted to be inside of her, and all over her, and she wanted to watch her sleep and wake up next to her and do it all over again. She didn't have time to wonder what in the hell was happening to her. Bella's softness, her eyes, her body, her breath, her voice, her mouth, her wetness, it was all too much for Rosalie. The next words that came out of her mouth were said with more intensity of feeling than she ever thought possible. "I want you so badly, Bella," she groaned, panting almost as hard as Bella all of a sudden. "I need you right now. Oh fuck, I want you so badly. Oh Bella. I want you so fucking badly." Bella kissed her desperately, angling her hips to give Rosalie better access. Rosalie couldn't believe the words that were coming out of her own mouth, but she couldn't stop herself. "You're so wet, Bella, you're so wet," she husked as she probed 2 fingers more deeply into Bella's folds. She couldn't stop saying her name. She loved the way it rolled off her tongue. She loved the way it made her feel. Adrenaline, more of that adrenaline. Every time she said it, every time she heard Bella pant her own name. So much adrenaline. She put her free hand behind Bella's head and buried her fingers in her hair as she ran her fingers one last time between her slit before sliding 2 into her hot center. Rosalie always had to work slowly at first. Bella was so tight and she would do anything not to hurt her. But Bella urged her in deeper, lifting her hips even more to meet Rosalie and pull her in. Rose brought her lips to meet Bella's and began to kiss her slowly, in time with her movements farther south. Bella moaned long and low into her mouth and Rose pressed deeper into the wetness. She kissed her deeply, as Bella completely surrendered to her, pulling Rosalie's tongue in farther as she began to thrust her hips against Rosalie's hand. Rosalie pushed in deeply, speeding up her movement as she began to use her leg behind her hand for more leverage. "Oh fuck Rose," Bella moaned as Rosalie increased the pace, her tight walls already clenching. She was so close already, Rosalie couldn't believe it. "Oh God, oh Rose, Rose Rose Rose," she chanted as Rosalie moved in and out, her whole body in graceful rhythm with Bella's. Rosalie used every part of her body when she fucked someone, moving in a way that had earned her quite a reputation for having exceptional skills, a reputation that only added to her long list of accomplishments. But it was well earned. Rosalie was good and she knew it. She caught Bella in another kiss, and thrust her tongue in at the same time as her fingers, earning a groan from Bella that was low and downright guttural. Bella was shaking and panting so hard that Rosalie had to break the kiss to give her air, so she began to suck forcefully on her neck. She could feel how close Bella was, feel how tense her whole body had become, so tightly wound up that at any minute she was bound to explode. She felt so good, she was so warm and tight, and getting wetter by the second, and so soft everywhere. "Rose Rose oh fuck Rose." Bella was moaning her name so loudly that Rosalie was sure by now that her roommates had heard. Rosalie was thrusting into her hard and fast, and each time Rosalie slid almost entirely out of that sweet center and then slammed back in, she earned a louder moan than the previous. Bella's arms were wrapped around Rosalie, hands firmly affixed onto Rosalie's lower back, pulling Rosalie in as close as she could, nails digging in deep enough to leave a mark. It was painful, but the best kind of pain, and Rosalie herself was so hot from fucking Bella that she was afraid the sheer feeling of those nails alone might send her over the edge. Every time Bella moaned, a jolt of heat shot through Rosalie, and with each kiss Rosalie knew she was in even more danger of coming herself. Bella was trying so hard to hold her own in, but Rosalie could feel how close she was, feel the hot wetness clenching down on her, desperately trying to keep her inside as she plunged in and out. "Rose, I can't, oh God Rose, I can't take." "Bella," Rosalie growled low and just as guttural, capturing those full lips and kissing her hard. She was ready. Rosalie knew she was beyond ready. "I want you to come for me." Rosalie thrust herself one last time into Bella and then pulled out slightly, curling her fingers inside her to find that rough spot she so loved as her thumb rubbed Bella's clit. She kissed Bella deeply, silencing her moans that had become screams. Rosalie knew the release Bella felt was huge, because she bit down on Rosalie's tongue hard. She pulled back, tasting blood, and watched as Bella tried to look into her eyes but failed as another wave hit her and her eyes rolled back. Hot fluid gushed all over Rosalie's hand, and she covered Bella's folds in it, spreading her juices around, rubbing her clit rhythmically. Bella continued to pulse, and as Rosalie slipped 3 fingers back inside of her and quickly rubbed and fucked her to another orgasm, she had to completely cover Bella's mouth with her free hand to silence her. Once she quieted down to a respectful moan, Rosalie rested their foreheads together and kissed her gently. Bella opened her eyes, and the feeling behind them made Rosalie's stomach drop. God, she's beautiful, Rosalie thought, and she was overwhelmed by the warmth she felt. In all places. Including her heart. Especially her heart. God, you're beautiful, Rosalie whispered as she tucked a strand of hair behind Bella's ear. "Are you okay? I mean, was that, are you all right?" Rosalie was stuttering over her words. That had never happened to her in her entire life. And Rosalie was asking someone if they were okay with her fucking them. With genuine concern. She couldn't believe all of this was happening to her, all because of this one girl. But God, it felt too good to worry about, so Rosalie just leaned in and kissed her again, waiting for her answer. When it didn't come, she paused and looked down. Bella? She searched questioningly into the beautiful girl's rich brown eyes. Bella looked different. Something was wrong. Rosalie smiled shyly, nervous. Shit, what's wrong with her? Did I hurt her? How can I fix this? Rosalie's mind raced as questions flew through her head. She couldn't think of what to say, and Bella wasn't saying anything, so she leaned down and kissed her again. Affectionately. For the first time in her life, she was kissing someone affectionately. She had been kissing Bella affectionately for months now. Rosalie was surprised when Bella returned the kiss, and Rosalie could sense equal feeling behind it. It was the softest, sweetest, but most emotional kiss Rosalie had ever known. She cupped Bella's flushed cheeks delicately, softly stroking them as their lips connected over and over. She'd never felt a kiss like this. She hated to break it, but she was still worried. She needed Bella to be okay. She needed her to be the same, because she feared that if Bella's feelings had somehow changed just as Rosalie was developing them, finally moving in the direction of something she thought she'd never achieve, Rosalie knew she would be ruined forever. The electricity from earlier had been replaced with anxiety, and she could feel it coursing through her. Please say everything is fine, she thought. Please don't change, please don't pull away, and please don't get weird and clingy. Please just be you. As Rosalie met Bella's eyes again, she bit her lower lip. There was something wrong. Bella looked distressed, upset. Rosalie could see her eyes get wet around the edges, a precursor to tears. Oh my God, Bella, I'm so sorry, she said, terrified in a way that was very new to her. If I hurt you, I'm so sorry, I swear I'm so sorry, please tell me what's wrong so I can fix it. She brought Bella's hand up to her lips and kissed it, her eyes searching Bella's intently and now quite desperately. Bella, if I did something to upset you or hurt you, I didn't mean it. Please don't be upset, tell me what's wrong. Rosalie couldn't believe the alien words that were spilling from her lips, much less the alien feelings that accompanied them. Bella's eyes teared more and she took a deep, shaky breath. All of a sudden she turned her head so she was no longer facing Rosalie. When Rosalie tried to stop her, she pushed her hand off. Bella, please, Rosalie pleaded, please tell me what's wrong. She kissed her hand again, rubbing her thumb over Bella's palm. Bella, look at me. Bella only shook her head no as she kept it turned, facing the wall. Rosalie was desperate now. Bella, please, what did I do? You didn't do anything, came her voice, quiet and shaky. She sounded on the verge of tears. She was on the verge of tears. No, that's not true. I did something. I did something to upset you and please tell me so I can fix. Rosalie's voice caught in her throat as Bella jerked her head back to face her, those eyes catching hers in a look that was heartbreakingly fearful. Rosalie couldn't think of what she'd done to scare her so much, but she knew it had to have been something she scared herself sometimes with the things she was capable of. Bella sighed, stilling herself and clearly struggling to hold Rosalie's gaze. You didn't do anything, she choked out. You are so perfect, you're incapable of doing anything wrong, I promise, she whispered. Rosalie didn't quite know what to make of that, but Bella was still upset and she had to make it better. She didn't know totally why, but she just had to. What is it, Bella? She questioned in a soothing tone, gently stroking Bella's fingers. Bella took one more shaky breath and closed her eyes. Rose, she paused, eyes still closed. I'm in love with you. Oh shit, Rosalie thought. Oh fucking shit. Shit, shit, shit. Rosalie was frozen. Completely frozen. She couldn't move, she couldn't think. At all, except for the word shit, 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 shit. Over and over and over. Bella's eyes searched hers. Of course now she wanted to make eye contact with Rosalie again, now that she'd let it all out, now that her confession had been made. Rose, I'm in love with you. Those words had thrown Rosalie into a tailspin. She had to think, and think fast. She had no intention of verbally returning the sentiment, but she feared Bella's reaction when she didn't. Not that Bella would be expecting anything, but was she expecting something? Rosalie didn't want to lose Bella. No, she wouldn't lose her. She could feel the adrenaline again, coursing through her. Bella is in love with me. Wait, no, stop thinking like that. Rosalie commanded her mind to stop wandering. Because now she was thinking about how strange it felt to hear that Bella loved her. Good, strange. Good. Rosalie felt kind of good. No, she definitely felt good. She took a deep breath, composing herself. She still hovered above Bella, and their eyes were still locked. Rosalie had no choice but to wing it. To just act on instinct or intuition or something. She knew she couldn't stay frozen much longer. But Rosalie had no idea what to say or do. This had never happened to her before. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she decided to just proceed without a plan. With no control. Oh, I am so fucked. Shit. Bella waited for a response. Rosalie bent down and kissed Bella's forehead, and as Bella instinctively closed her eyes, she pressed her lips to Bella's delicate eyelids, first the left, then the right, as she murmured, "No tears, it's okay, no tears." She knew that no other words would come to her, so she moved to kiss Bella's swollen lips instead, but paused when she realized Bella was biting them. No lip biting either, Bella. Her eyes had opened, and Rosalie looked into her, hoping that her own gaze didn't betray her inner turmoil. Bella's looked calmer, less frightened, but she was hard to read in that moment, too hard for Rosalie to read. A small sigh escaped of the smaller girl's lips as Rosalie ran her thumb over the soft palm of the hand she'd captured earlier. God, she still looks so beautiful. Rosalie found her to look so heartbreakingly, achingly beautiful in this moment that it made her tremble. Bella's shiny, auburn-brown locks lay thick and full as they spread out around her head on the mattress, with a few wisps floating up and framing her face in a way that made her look almost ethereal. "Why are you shaking?" Bella gasped. Rosalie did not answer. She would not answer. The room was dark, but there was enough ambient light from various electronics that Rosalie could see her clearly, and in that light Bella was hauntingly lovely. Clear, soft, creamy white skin contrasted perfectly flushed cheeks. Eyes, so full of emotion, perfectly shaped, and a million different shades of deep, rich brown, flecks of gold, rings of dark topaz. Bella was truly exquisite. Rosalie smiled into those eyes, slight but honest, and watched as Bella's gaze changed from one of uncertainty and fear to pure adoration. Actually, suddenly Bella looked like she was in awe. Rosalie was pulled from her revelry as Bella spoke. "Rose," she whispered, "has there ever been anyone on earth as beautiful as you?" Rosalie felt warmth in her own cheeks. Was she blushing? Rosalie had been called beautiful so many times, and she always received it graciously, although it was frequently said to her with more undertones of spite and jealousy than of true admiration. But it never made her feel warmth. She was beautiful, she knew it. Cold, hard, and perfect Rosalie was so exceptionally beautiful that it gave strangers pause. But despite having heard this about herself countless thousands of times, nothing could compare to the times when Bella said it. Bella's words made her feel alive, made her feel something. Once again, Rosalie had no idea what it was. She chuckled again to herself, thinking how funny it was that after so many years of believing that the simpler emotions of life didn't apply to her, here she was tongue-tied and clueless and falling in helplessly love with some random girl. Who was a nobody and more special than anyone at the same time? How arrogant was I? This time she chuckled out loud. Thinking that I was too complicated, too special to get caught up in such a cliché, pedestrian affliction of falling in love. God, this serves me right. I'm such an idiot. Hey, don't laugh at me, Bella teased, noticing that Rosalie was actually chuckling out loud. Her voice lightened the mood considerably. Let me guess, you're so insanely beautiful and you know it, so when someone says it you laugh, right? She smirked at Rosalie. Because it's just like so obvious. Bella's Valley Girl impression was actually pretty good. No, Rosalie replied, although Bella's little quip made her chuckle again, not exactly helping her credibility. No. Bella's teasing was getting bolder. So you're not laughing thinking about how funny it will be to tell your secret club of like, extremely hot beautiful genius rich people about when the weird little neighbor you're sleeping with asked you if you were the most beautiful person on the planet? Very funny, Rosalie deadpanned. I was actually thinking that I was such an idiot. Wait, what? Why are you an idiot? Bella asked softly, seriously. She sounded concerned. This was Rosalie's moment. This was her chance to push herself, to try to open herself up to the possibility that her life wasn't so predetermined after all. She sighed, trying to muster the resolve to keep speaking. She licked her lips nervously. Because. She paused, unsure of what on earth she was going to say next. Because I'm never nervous, but. Bella, you make me nervous, and She stalled. What the hell am I saying? She thought, but thankfully not out loud this time. Bella waited intently for Rosalie to finish her sentence. Just Bella, can we stay together? Tonight I mean? Well, For the rest of the night? I want to wake up with you. Next to you. I know we don't want to get caught and everything, but I just don't think I can leave you right now. I just really don't want to leave you right now. But I totally get it if. Rose. Bella cut her off. I don't want you to leave me either. In fact, please don't. Please stay. The exchange was intense, at least for Rosalie. As minor as it may have sounded to some, that was probably the most vulnerable she'd ever allowed herself to be in her entire life. She'd actually given Bella an opportunity to reject her. And now that she hadn't been rejected, the surge of confidence coursing through her brought her down to Bella for a heated kiss. Bella kissed her so deeply, so lovingly, all soft, full lips and insistent tongue. Rosalie began to pant again. This was so intense, too intense actually. She needed to bring things down a notch. She'd already had enough emotional outpouring for one night. Or 30 nights, she mused. So, after a few minutes of kissing the most beautiful girl in the world, at least in Rosalie's eyes, Rosalie pulled away. Once again staring deeply into Bella's eyes, she asked her, voice laden with emotion, Bella, I need to ask you something. Rosalie feigned a gulp, and watched as those hypnotic brown orbs below her widened. I never thought brown could be so beautiful, she mused. Yeah? Bella responded, breathless herself from the kiss. Rosalie paused again. It appeared as if another admission was on the way. How did you know about my secret club? Oh, you are such an asshole. Bella shrieked as she smacked Rosalie on the shoulder. I knew there was a secret club. Do you guys brush each other's perfect hair, and take pictures of each other in super fancy outfits, like in Clueless? Bella was giggling like crazy, clearly cracking herself up. Oh wait no. You guys actually meet in a secret compound to discuss global policy and then use your insane beauty to influence world politics? And I bet you guys are like superheroes. I mean, odds are there have to be at least 20 other people in the world that are as beautiful as you are. That's enough for a Justice League team-up, right? She continued to giggle, and Rosalie was too entertained to quiet her, not to mention too turned from Bella's superhero reference. Rosalie and Emmett loved comic books, but she'd never known a girl that even tried to understand them, much less reference them. Oh wow Rose, you would make a perfect superhero. Or special ops, like a Navy SEAL. God, I bet you look good in a wetsuit. With the last sentence, Bella groaned. Again. She hadn't really been this bold with Rosalie until recently, laughing and talking about her so freely. And teasing her this was still somewhat new, but Rosalie liked it. Well, Rosalie interjected. I can neither confirm nor deny anything, but yeah, she sighed dramatically, I've been told I look pretty good in a wetsuit. Oh that ego, Rose, I think it's the only thing bigger than that stupid trust fund of yours. Bella poked her in the ribs. Hey, Rosalie gasped. Oh, I don't think so, little one. She grabbed Bella's wrists and wrestled them over her head, staring down at her with an evil grin. Oh I so think so, Bella retorted as she struggled to break free. And I bet in between saving the world and influencing foreign governments, I bet you and your super insanely hot beautiful secret friend team spends tons of time talking about how hot you guys are, and super smart, and awesome, and I bet you probably talk about all the chicks or dudes you're all betting. Wow, Bella, there must be a mole in the club, how do you know all this? Rosalie feigned shock. Ha. So it's true. I knew it. Well, when you're talking about your recent conquests, I hope you tell them how good I am in bed. Bella smirked, so pleased with herself. With almost lightning speed Rosalie had flipped them over so that Bella was straddling her, and she ran her hands up Bella's thighs right to her center, spreading her open so that her wet, extremely warm core pressed directly against Rosalie's stomach. Bella moaned at the contact, clearly surprised at the sudden change of pace. Well Bella, Rosalie purred seductively, her eyes washing over Bella's body wantonly. I don't feel comfortable presenting that to the club without sufficient evidence. Can you maybe show me one more time? She grabbed Bella by the hips and began rolling her back and forth, rocking her against her own core as she moved her lower. Bella placed her hands on top of Rosalie's and quickly squeezed them, and then lowered her hands to Rosalie's shoulders, pinning her to the mattress. Rosalie tried to move 2 fingers down to Bella's core, but this time it was Bella who caught her wrist. Rosalie, she husked. Leaning in to kiss her neck, she licked a clean line up to her earlobe and whispered. You told me patience was a virtue. Uh-huh, Rosalie responded, at a loss for words as she could feel fingers not her own traveling south. "And I've been so patient, don't you think?" It was Rosalie's turn to gasp as Bella slowly stroked the outside of her folds. This was that whole other side of Bella. One of the many sides that Rosalie knew she'd fallen in love with, and she was too surprised to stop her. Rosalie moaned again. Still at a loss for words. Rosalie Hale was never at a loss for words. "So now, Rosalie Hale, I have earned the right to do what I want with you, got it?" Bella was teasing her slit mercilessly, running her fingers up and down it, slipping in and then moving away entirely. Rosalie was paralyzed with arousal, the adrenaline coursing through every molecule, and she felt like she was on fire, on the strongest party drug times 100. "So let me give you something to tell your club about." Bella was growling. But the rest of Rosalie's coherent thoughts were lost as 3 fingers pushed deep inside of her, and for once in her life she finally let someone else take control. She couldn't remember the first time she met Bella. Actually, she couldn't remember the first 50 or so times she'd been around Bella. They'd moved into the apartment next door in November, Bella and her roommates. But Rosalie didn't remember consciously noticing Bella until the following spring, maybe May or so, she thought. It wasn't because Bella wasn't worth noticing. To the contrary, when Rosalie finally realized she existed in more than just an arbitrary, passing way, she realized that Bella was actually quite beautiful. Actually, she was extremely beautiful. Months later, Rosalie marveled at the fact that she had been so self-centered that she hadn't noticed. Bella was really, really beautiful. Soft, full lips. Long, shiny brown hair that was better described as auburn simply because no better adjective existed to canvas the incredible depths of highlights and lowlights that her tantalizingly soft hair possessed. And those eyes deep brown and slightly lidded at the top, making her always look the tiniest bit sleepy, or maybe, sleepy. Wasn't the right word. Those eyes were definitely bedroom eyes, Rosalie thought. The kind of eyes that could make a mind start to wander in the direction of that same, extremely fitting adjective. Once Rosalie noticed those eyes, she knew she was in trouble. She knew she was headed into that tricky world of uncertainty and insecurity, and worst of all, vulnerability. A world she couldn't control. Rosalie laughed at herself thinking about that first time she'd seen Bella's eyes and gotten that feeling in her stomach. It was so typical, so fucking predictable, that she was going to have to give up that perfectly comfortable world of control that she'd created for herself. "This always happens to people like me," she thought. "We create our own orderly, controlled lives just to have something trivial come along and throw them into chaos. Well, not full-on chaos, but a lesser, still frustrating version of it." Rosalie had the gift of thinking in patterns, and she knew the patterns of life, especially as they applied to people like her. Control freak was way too pedestrian a term. However, sociopath, as she'd been lovingly diagnosed many times in her life by a series of annoyingly smug, typically small-minded and exorbitantly expensive psychiatrists, wasn't correct either, at least not in Rosalie's case. The pattern she understood herself to be influenced by was more or less a wave principle. Work to gain control over each person, each interaction, each emotion in your life, get to the apex where everything is figured out, and then some outside variable will get thrown in and quickly send you crashing back down into a sea of uncertainty. Slowly recover, get back to the apex, and then crash, again, and again, and again. Rosalie had gotten to the point where she could watch the entire process almost objectively, as much as this is possible when you're looking at yourself. She could even see the humor in it. Control was impossible, she knew it. But what to do about that? Therein lies the rub. Rosalie knew herself, she knew her flaws, she knew why she did what she did, and she knew why she was the way she was. Complete self-awareness, she thought. Most people spend their whole lives trying to get to that point, and here I am, 29 years old, and I've already got it. And for Rosalie, here was the funny part, the best part, the part that no one seems to ever acknowledge. You can know exactly why you do what you do, what happened, always in childhood and adolescence, shocker. And mostly because of your parents, double shocker, that made you that way, what motivates you, what faults you have, all of it. The best, funniest part about life, Rosalie thought to herself, is that it doesn't fucking matter. I know exactly what my deal is. I know exactly why something hurts me. I know what I'm afraid of and I know why. I know where my darkest urges come from. I've identified everything down to the tiniest minutia and including the ickiest, most uncomfortable parts, and yet it doesn't change anything. Rosalie knew the greatest myth about therapy, About that self-awareness one is supposed to strive for, the complete understanding of your own twisted motivations behind the things you do and the identification of the real truths behind why certain things cause you pain, what fears drive you to do what you do, to be who you are. Here's that myth: once you figure it out, you feel better, or liberated, or finally alive, or some other garbage along those cliché lines. Here's the real truth: you're still afraid, and it still hurts, and you still want to do the dark, icky stuff. Congratulations, you truly know yourself. But guess what? It still sucks. Identification of your fear and pain and darkness does not take it away at all. It just makes you feel weaker and less in control, because now I know the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, the how, and etc. Yet and I'm still afraid, and I still feel pain, and I still think dark things. This is what Rosalie knew. And she knew of at least 71 psychiatrists, psychologists, wellness coaches, spiritual advisors, and assorted religious figures on the island of Manhattan alone that had no idea what to do with you after you figured all that stuff out. This is partly why Rosalie didn't notice Bella at first. She'd pretty much figured out by now that she wasn't going to get a lot from people, so she just really didn't take notice of them without being prompted. The sad fact for Rosalie was that she'd learned, trial by fire, that most people were actually pretty stupid. They couldn't think beyond a certain point. They were all still looking for the who, what, where, and why, whereas Rosalie had long since progressed past that to the what now part, the part that most people simply weren't smart enough for, or were too self-deluded, to ever get to. This fact didn't give Rosalie any pleasure or satisfaction. She didn't revel in the fact that she was possibly just more intelligent, that her brain was possibly just more superior. Frankly, it just made her feel lonely. She still wished that she could connect with people. Contrary to popular belief, she did want to have friends, and she certainly did not consider herself too good for everyone, as had been said so often about her. But she found herself so frequently disappointed in her efforts that in the past few years she found herself rarely able to muster the effort to bother anymore. And she didn't need to. People were so drawn to her beauty, her wealth, her accomplishments, her social standing, that she could put off the appearance of being widely popular and valued without really having to try. She was grateful for this. She knew she was extremely lucky, and often wondered how horrible it must be to live life in a head like hers without the beauty and body to compensate. Rosalie remembered that night in May, clearly not the date, of course, but the feeling. She wouldn't ever forget that. She had been reclining outside on one of the two chaise lounges she'd just had delivered, reveling in the rare satisfaction of accomplishment that was currently washing over her. She could feel eyes on her, watching her, but this wasn't a surprise, nor was it uncomfortable. The brunette girl in the backyard adjacent to Rosalie's had been sitting out there most of the day, reading, but more frequently, watching Rosalie assemble the two chairs and work in her garden and around her own yard. Their yards were only separated by a tall trellis fence with a doorway cut out to link them, and while the trellis at least gave the illusion of a barrier, one could easily see right through it. Of course, the darker-haired girl still didn't think Rosalie had noticed her watching, staring actually. But of course Rosalie had noticed, and she didn't mind. It had been hot for a spring day in New York, about 85 degrees, and Rosalie had decided a few days prior to order 2 teak lounge chairs that she knew would require assembly. She obviously didn't do this to save money. Rosalie just liked to do these types of things herself. She liked the feeling it gave her. So of course the girl next door had spent most of the day watching her Rosalie hail 15 feet away in white shorts, very short shorts at that, and a long, tight black ribbed tank, her extremely long legs still quite tan from a recent weekend in St. Bart's, her long blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, just the slightest bit of sweat glistening on her as she muscled the heavy wooden components into place. Anyone would have had a hard time not staring at her. Rosalie would have preferred to have been completely alone, but she didn't really mind that the company next door was so actively admiring her, and she especially liked that this neighbor girl thought Rosalie hadn't noticed. Plus, the eyes fixed on her gave Rosalie a slight tingling sensation on her clear, lightly bronzed skin. At the time, she attributed it to being hungover from the previous night's bourbon tasting with her brother. But it felt weird and good, and so she didn't mind the girl's very unsubtle gaze on her, or the feelings it was eliciting, at all. Might as well milk this a little bit, Rosalie thought as she walked, more like glided. Rosalie was of course very graceful, over to the pull-up bar her brother Emmett had insisted on installing in the doorway of the trellis divider that separated the two backyards. She was now directly in the girl's line of sight and too close to go unacknowledged. So Rosalie grasped both ends of the bar and leaned forward into the doorway, smirking at this girl seductively and uttering a quick, "Hey." The girl, who had resumed the "just reading a magazine" ruse with renewed intensity upon noticing that Rosalie was walking over, looked up now, and Rosalie detected a small gasp, as this poor girl's eyes fell on what was essentially a supermodel, now only 8 feet away, and leaning lazily forward with her arms above and behind her so that her back arched and every muscle on her perfectly toned upper body engaged and flexed slightly. Rosalie had intentionally scrunched her tank at the waist so that it rode up just enough to give the girl a peek of her lower abdominals, and her breasts, perfect, very full B-cups that they were, with nipples that an ex-boyfriend once joked were so perfect they should be in the Smithsonian comic book nipples, he called them. Rosalie hated that her nipples were always hard. She found it extremely embarrassing. Her ex-boyfriends did not feel the same way. Anyway, Rosalie leaned into the doorframe in such a way that those breasts poked out prominently, and Rosalie could barely stifle a chuckle as this brown-haired girl gasped and raked her eyes up and down Rosalie's body before stopping at her breasts and staying there. Oh, and Rosalie wasn't wearing a bra. Oops. Hey, the girl mumbled back, quickly bringing her eyes up to a more appropriate spot and blushing furiously. She got out of the chair she'd been sitting in and walked over to Rosalie, pausing about 2 feet away. "What the fuck are these tingles?" Rosalie questioned internally. "Maybe I tweaked a nerve or something?" The tingles got worse when the girl stopped in front of her and smiled shyly. "Oh shit," Rosalie thought, "I can't remember her fucking name. That goddamn girl and her roommates have probably sat outside with me, and Jasper only about 60 fucking times, and I still can't remember her name." Rosalie, despite her patrician upbringing and generally excellent manners, had quite a fondness for cussing, especially to herself. And right now she cursed herself for not having the courtesy to have remembered this girl's name, only because she considered herself to be better than that. But whatever, there were so many people that fell into Rosalie's "forgive me, but who are you" category that this was hardly noteworthy. So Rosalie pressed on, recovering quickly from her momentary internal lapse in courtesy to return to the more pressing issue at hand. Fucking a little bit with the neighbor girl who'd been staring at her more or less all day. "So," Rosalie said with a tinge of sarcasm, looking directly at the girl and smirking again. "I just wanted to give you the heads up that I'm going to do a few pull-ups." Rosalie paused, enjoying the confusion on the girl's face, knowing she was extremely intimidated by Rosalie right now and probably thoroughly embarrassed from so blatantly checking her out a moment prior. "You know, so that you don't think, why is this weirdo doing pull-ups 8 feet away from me without even saying a word to me, or something." Rosalie had the humility thing down pat, and she saw the relief immediately wash across the girl's features. When it came to manipulating others' emotions, Rosalie was no slouch. "Oh, I don't think you're a weirdo," the girl said genuinely as she kicked at an invisible pebble on the ground. "No shit," Rosalie thought to herself, "of course you don't. You think I'm hot and scary and a bitch and way out of your league, and you probably hated me up to this point. But now that I've said something so sweetly self-depreciating, you're going to feel special and different and very confused about me. And God knows you'll be a lot easier to manipulate now if I need you for something." Rosalie played these kinds of games with people all day long, and right now Bella wasn't any different to her. But instead of comforting or placating Bella with any reassuring comment in response to her generous but predictable remark, Rosalie instead just silently let go of the bar and bent down to adjust the shoelace on one of her tray torns. She slowly raised her head, looking up at the neighbor girl and squinting slightly, and she unleashed one of her best, killer Rosalie smiles. She held it long enough to see the girl's eyes widen and her mouth open slightly to start to speak, and then Rosalie immediately stood up, turned her back and reached back up to the bar, smiling to herself. Of course, nothing had been wrong with her shoelace. Rosalie was just pulling a classic power switch. Getting down low in a submissive posture causes your opponent to lower their defenses and gives them a subconscious feeling of control. Then throw in one of those smiles that makes their knees go weak, but follow it by immediately turning your back and walking away. Push. Pull. Push. Pull. She could practically hear the turmoil in the brunette's head. God, people are so easy, she mused as she began pulling herself up to the top of the bar. She held herself up there, back fully flexed, until she heard the crunch of gravel stop and knew the girl was once again sitting down. And Rosalie could feel the girl's eyes on her back. Her perfectly muscled back. but Rosalie was still tingling. "Fucking Emmett and his bourbon," she groused, too low for the neighbor girl to hear. Rosalie repped up and down, easily finishing 20 pull-ups, no small feat for a woman. She had worked hard to become incredibly strong, but she made sure to stay extremely lean. Never looking over-muscled or manly, just toned. Her abs were in particularly great shape because she'd just shot a Ralph Lauren Blue Label internal corporate mailer, and she'd had to wear a number of extremely skimpy bikinis. It wasn't a huge shoot, but Mr. Lauren had specifically requested her, so Rosalie had trained ruthlessly the month before, and currently her abs were amazing, every groove and contour of the individual muscles visible but not so prominent that she appeared to have tried. It looked natural. And hot. Rosalie wasn't a total asshole, but she knew she looked hot. And when she first showed Em and Jasper her stomach, right before the shoot, the number of dudes and holy shits and high fives she got from them were pretty flattering and definitely hysterical. Anyway, knowing what she knew about her stomach, Rosalie dropped off the pull-up bar and turned enough so that her body was again facing in the girl, but she kept her gaze fixed in the direction of her own backyard. Feigning calculated obliviousness expertly, Rosalie grabbed the bottom of her tank top and pulled it up to wipe the sweat from her brow. The tight, ribbed black cotton tank was long enough that, pulled up, the bottom could reach her forehead without revealing the entirety of her chest. And as she pulled it up to reveal her chiseled midsection and just the slightest flash of the bottoms of her perfect breasts, both glistening from a light coat of perspiration and sun, she heard the sound of glass shattering and a muffled "fuck," and looked over to see that the neighbor girl had just dropped the glass of whatever she had been drinking mid-sip. Rosalie knew she was a strange blend. She actually had tremendous empathy for those less fortunate, who suffered at the hands of others. If she was walking down the street alone, she'd smile at the older people, or the fat women, or the nerdy teens, or basically anyone that looked vulnerable and weak, or sad. They usually all went hand in hand. And her attention would actually make them happy. They'd beam back at her. She'd offer them a compliment and a genuine, warm smile. And they'd walk away feeling differently, maybe better, at least for a few moments. Rosalie wasn't delusional. She knew didn't have some power to leave a lasting impression that would really help, but she did believe in the power of human kindness, and she marveled at the fact that her appearance alone was actually powerful enough that, when added with a smile and a compliment or comment that no one expected, "Why would she ever talk to me?" she could actually turn someone's day around. Regardless of why it worked, doing this type of thing made her happy, and it also made her sad for them, for the suffering and insecurity she imagined they wrestled with. How arrogant of me, she often thought, assuming these people aren't happy simply because of how I think they look. I smile like I'm doing them a favor. God, I'm an asshole. And for me to assume I'm better than them? Although Rosalie couldn't really buy into that last part of her thought, she knew that, although on the inside she certainly wasn't better than them, in fact probably worse, on the outside she was in a totally different orbit. But she didn't dwell on this. She didn't really think about what she did. She just did it, smiling and chatting her way around the Upper East Side. She liked the feeling it gave her. Maybe it was selfish, maybe not. Well, it probably was. But Rosalie knew that she could count on one hand the number of other gorgeous, wealthy young, or old, socialites who would ever stop to smile at a chubby girl or compliment an elderly veteran. The people that she'd lost, who she sometimes pictured looking down on her from heaven, maybe kindness would make them proud, because they'd taught her to be good and kind, and she'd listened. In spite of herself, she listened. So here is where Rosalie knew she got interesting. Although Rosalie would do just about anything to make the awkward teenage girl with greasy hair and dorky outfit feel good about herself, and this empathy she felt, she knew this was why she wasn't, in fact, a true sociopath. When it came to that other type of teenage girl, the one that would pick on greasy hair and chub, the one that took obvious pleasure in herself and tormented others. Yes, of course, it was because of her own low self-esteem and blah blah blah, but for Rosalie, that hardly justified it. That girl would bring out the terrifying, powerful, evil side of Rosalie, the one that got her the sociopath diagnosis in the first place. Rosalie had wrestled with awful feelings like this for as long as she could remember. The absolute hatred for people that preyed on the vulnerabilities of people that already suffered. The despicable need to hurt others for your own benefit without just cause. Those feelings worried her, because they made her want to do horrible, reprehensible, awful things, the kind that would lock her up for life. In layman's terms, when it came to other people, Rosalie wanted to either protect them or kill them. Literally. She knew where the bloodlust came from: an extremely, exceptionally abusive father. A miserable childhood, the usual, really, and she knew why she had it, but she knew that giving in to it would be akin to failure. It would be giving in to the pain of her early years, and she would become, in a weird way, just like everyone else, a slave to their emotions, too stupid to become self-aware, incapable of controlling their desires. How common, Rosalie thought, how pedestrian, succumbing to an urge like that, how cliché, oh my childhood was awful and I just can't help but kill people, pathetic. A long time ago Rosalie had vowed that she was better and smarter than what she felt, and after working extremely hard to understand the who, what, when, where, why, and how behind not only her serious desire to kill other people, coupled with her strange version of empathy, she was now 29, completely self-aware, riding the wave of accomplishment, setback, accomplishment, or, as mentioned before, control, loss, control, and doing pretty well for herself. Rosalie knew explaining any of this to almost any other human being was impossible. They'd naturally decide that Rosalie's occasional desire to kill, and literally, was basically the paramount underlying issue in her life, blame her miserable childhood, and shut the book. And they wouldn't have been more wrong. Rosalie was complicated, and she wasn't afraid to accept that her dark urges were just another part of what made her so complicated. Yet another reason why she didn't seek out real relationships with other people they weren't smart enough to understand, much less engage in any kind of meaningful conversation, and most importantly, if she got to know them well enough they would often end up showing themselves as being that type of person that Rosalie hated and secretly, even to herself, feared. The type of person that made her blood boil. Being a beautiful 29-year-old socialite in Manhattan tends to expose you to a lot of those, pick upon the weaker, grown-up versions of basic teenage girls, and guys, spineless or aggressive, but nonetheless delusional and cruel, versions of the mother and father that had raised her. So Rosalie's coldness, her lack of interest in most people, her inability to notice Bella for months and months, it all came from a desire not to see that side of people, the truth that they were not only never smart enough to say anything meaningful, and more often than not, would eventually expose themselves to be exactly the type of person that would bring out the dark side of Rosalie that she was determined to keep control over. The type of person that would hurt her if she didn't hurt them first. Her life until that ambiguous time sometime in, maybe, May had been pretty under control, for lack of a more creative term. The previous November, Rosalie had left her beautiful, isolated Fifth Avenue apartment to move in with her brother Emmett and his best friend Jasper. They were both 4 years younger than Rosalie and still existed in a totally different world of partying and youth, and living in the moment, a world that Rosalie had abandoned immediately after graduating college. Rosalie had spent her first 6 years after Yale ensconced in work, moving quickly up the proverbial corporate ladder at Ralph Lauren after a well-timed introduction to one of the company's senior executives courtesy of her parents' old money connections landed her a job as an assistant in the PR department. She'd worked incredibly hard, excelled at her job, and soon found herself managing the very people she'd initially worked for, and quite successfully at that. In a huge company, Rosalie found herself quickly noticed by the most senior people, although more because of her looks and pedigree than her hard work. That didn't bother Rosalie. She wasn't naive enough to think that hard work alone would ever get anyone any place. That was a charming fairy tale told to the young in order to combat the laziness that would follow if the real truths about success in life were told. Hard work mattered, but alone it rarely paid off. Networking, connections, appearances, perceptions, that was the stuff that careers were built on. Rosalie knew this and was more than willing to use every weapon in her arsenal to achieve success. In New York, people like Rosalie were almost mythical, the kind of person that everyone wanted to be and aspired to live like. The company she worked for, Ralph Lauren, was practically founded on recreating the myth that was Rosalie Hale for the masses. The old money, the prep school traditions, the waspy summer home style mixed with the wealth of big business, and the Gatsby-esque dream of beautiful people, elaborate furnishings, estates, polo matches, colony club dinners, and pissing contests over who had more to drink after the Bermuda race, or can you believe how nouveau the Hamptons are becoming? Rosalie was born into a life of privilege beyond privilege, of blue-blood grandeur mixed with wasp modesty that finds nothing as chicer than flying first class to Nice in the worn wool sweater your grandfather bought at the Holmes store in Northeast before swamping the Flying 15 in Back Bay. Rosalie could beat all of them. Oh, your mother was in the DAR? I was going to Deb at the Mayflower Society, seeing as my family goes back that far in 3 separate lines, and did you know we were the first to truly govern Plymouth? But anyways, I was selected for the Crillian Ball and I just couldn't do both. She knew exactly how to play the part and her employers ate it up. For a wasp, Rosalie was quite tall, 5 feet 9 feet in fact, tall enough to be a model and certainly beautiful enough for it, so she started that in junior high for extra money, and continued through college and beyond. Even as busy as her job kept her, she managed to find time to fit in a few black and blue label print campaigns. As per Mr. Lauren's request, in between hobnobbing with celebrities and managing a public relations department with a staff of 18. All at the tender age of 26. She inspired a tremendous amount of jealousy, and her aloof, charming and then distant push and pull was so entrancing that most of the New York fashion world either wanted her, wanted to be her, or secretly wanted to push her in front of the 4 train. Not like she ever took the subway, thank God. But Rosalie didn't really care. She loved to work, she felt powerful and in control, and valuable for the first time in her life. Moving in with her brother, and trying to reconnect with her former, party girl self. It had existed in prep school and college, although always carefully controlled, had actually been her idea. It was Rosalie's way of trying to combat her inherent wish, her intrinsic longing, to be alone. She knew it wasn't healthy, but without a catalyst, she would easily succumb to the desire to refuse an invitation to a club opening in favor of a quiet sail on the Hudson or a good book on a blanket in the park alone. Emmett, Rosalie's brother, was a total bro, a former frat boy, extremely handsome, funny, charming, and outgoing. He loved to meet people. Hell, he just plain loved people. He actually hated to be alone. Sometimes Rosalie had no idea how the two of them could have both suffered from the same horrors in childhood, but yet turn out so differently. Granted, Emmett had only witnessed those horrors being young, and more importantly, a boy. He had been spared from the actual abuse. But he watched it, and Rosalie knew it affected him. But here he was, a grown-up 25-year-old with a modest 3-bedroom rental in a much more modest part of town, having the time of his life in his big backyard. And he adored Rosalie. He wanted so desperately to have her in his life. So when he begged for Rosalie to take the 3rd room, she acquiesced. As much as she dreaded what that would entail, she knew Emmett's boisterous behavior and predilection for peer pressure. Did not take no for an answer, would force her to withdraw from her career, justified, but secretly self-imposed, quasi-isolation. Rosalie wanted the challenge if nothing else. Rosalie Hale loved a challenge. So she took the room, put all of her beautiful furniture in cold storage, and slummed it in Yorkville with her baby brother. And to her partial surprise, it was fun. She was starting to have fun. Only with Emmett and now Jasper, who had earned her trust, through exposure more than anything else, but fun nonetheless. Instead of going to PR events after work to pointlessly chat up Mrs. So-and-so and Lady something-something, Rosalie was now heading home to drink cheap beer and shoot the shit with a bunch of 25-year-old boys. Emmett had always worshipped Rosalie, and Jasper quickly followed suit, but not in an annoying way. Yes, they thought she was hysterical and brilliant and fun, but she felt the same about them. Especially Emmett. No one understood her like he did. He knew about her dark impulses, her twisted past, and he accepted it. They had the same twisted sense of humor, and together they were funny. Very funny. Emmett had friends over all the time. He loved to show off his older sister. Rosalie had cemented Emmett's reputation as somewhat of a god amongst his college and hedge fund co-worker peers. On his own he was already wildly handsome, and wealthy but modest, and accomplished and charming, but with his sister guys would come over and simply stare at her. There was something exceptional about Rosalie, she knew this, something that made her that much more beautiful and rare. She drew people to her like a magnet. That endless blonde hair, perfectly tanned, toned body, the bright, piercing green eyes, the face that would launch 1,000 beer-filled canoes. Emmett's words, not hers. Emmett's older sister was becoming something of legend in the financial community. And as, among many other things that made him cool, her blood relation, Emmett was considered pretty much the man. Everyone wanted an invite to their parties. Everyone wanted a shot at trying to seduce her. Of course, no one could ever seduce her, but if Rosalie felt like it, she could seduce them. And she felt like it often. Her bisexuality was no secret. She bedded guys and girls with the same frequency. This annoyed some of her lesbian acquaintances to no end, as they insisted that no one could actually like both, but Rosalie ignored this. She didn't care what other people thought about her choices. When you're that beautiful, you can get away with that. She knew that after the gross injustices of her formative years, it was a miracle that she was sexually attracted to anyone, male or female, so she ignored the comments and just went with it. The only problem with Rosalie's sexuality was that it gave license for everyone to throw themselves at her. Even if she wanted to, making friends was almost impossible. Most people around her always had underlying intentions of something more, either sex or suffering. Even Jasper wanted desperately to fuck her, but fear of the wrath of Emmett kept him at bay. Emmett was the only one who was safe, and so she stuck to his side in lieu of making other friends. He was a good brother, a great brother, actually, and in her own way, with Emmett's persistent prodding, Rosalie began to actually have fun. That first winter that they lived at the apartment, they did see the neighbor girls quite often, twice, maybe 3 times a week. The girls would come out into their own yard as Emmett and Rosalie sat in theirs, sharing a cigarette or a joke or whatever. And the parties, God knows, they'd be there for the parties. Emmett threw legendary parties. Frequently. The neighbor girls all adored Rosalie, hanging on her words whenever she spoke, goading her into joining them for games of beer pong or asshole or whatever, all of which Rosalie politely declined. They tried to know her, but Rosalie had no intention of knowing them. One of them, Alice, was okay. She worked in PR as well, for Calvin Klein, and even though she knew exactly who Rosalie was before they'd ever met, she didn't treat Rosalie like she was a big deal. Alice was somewhat of a big deal in her own right, with lots of friends and connections and a boyfriend whose mother was the editor of Vogue. But surprisingly, she wasn't an asshole, as most, or almost all, girls in PR in New York tended to be. Alice did her own thing. She was funny, clever, and she didn't push Rosalie into anything. Rosalie found herself actually starting to like her, and although between work commitments they saw each other infrequently, she almost had when fun trying on clothes with Alice, or chatting. It took some effort, but Rosalie knew she needed to at least try to make friends, and Alice was one of the first girls she'd met in a while that wasn't intimidated by her. She was nonplussed by Rosalie's designer wardrobe, as she herself wore the same things, and she didn't seem interested in seducing Rosalie. It was refreshing. So long before the other 2 girls, Rosalie did notice Alice. The other 2, not so much. They were sisters, Bella and Leah, although Rosalie had yet to learn their names at that point, and to her they seemed like one and the same. In reality, they were completely different in every way, barely even sharing a resemblance, but strangely, Rosalie often confused them. They talked incessantly, and tried to show off with stories of parties or money, and they laughed too hard at Rosalie's jokes. Hung too closely on her words. Really, it was more the one sister that did, but Rosalie just didn't care enough to tell them apart. They seemed shallow, and insecure, and frankly, boring. They had nothing to offer Rosalie, so she mostly ignored them, or made idle chit-chat while waiting for Emmett to arrive back from a beer run. Looking back, Rosalie couldn't believe she hadn't noticed Bella. Bella was so very different from her sister. But Leah was just so overpowering and loud that at the time that she just seemed to swallow Bella right up. And Rosalie was so busy with her work, and her events, and spending time with her brother that she just hadn't cared. Rosalie Hale was very good at not caring. Things changed quickly after that fateful early evening in the spring when Rosalie had displayed those abs and Bella had dropped that wineglass. The day Bella truly became a part of her life was a strange one for Rosalie, one of a string of strange days that she'd had for almost a month at that point. Rosalie had quit her job that month, her frustration with the politics at Polo becoming too much to make the job worth it. Rosalie hadn't had any problems in her role. She was the golden child at the company, loved by everyone, and constantly on display. But a few of the directors above her didn't feel the same way about her co-workers. They weren't attractive enough, the secretary was too old, the assistant market editor was too fat, etc. They were on a power trip that was frustrating to watch, and Rosalie was unable to protect some of the people she cared most for at the company from the bullying and emotional torture and final termination they were subjected to. It was getting pretty disgusting. She wasn't a saint, but she could identify with them better than she could with her superiors. And she hated what was being done to them. So she quit. She didn't need the money, and she was tired of working so hard for a company whose leaders she no longer believed in. And she was tired of the bullshit, surprising herself by admitting that it was all just too shallow. Because Rosalie knew she was shallow. But as she came to find out, even she had a threshold. So when Bella showed up, Rosalie wasn't working for the first time in her post-college life. At first, it had been wonderful, the extra workouts, the sleep, the shopping. But without the wall of constant work to keep Rosalie away from her thoughts, the dark side of her had quickly returned. Those past few weeks had become more and more consumed by Rosalie's twisted desires. She wanted to kill someone. She wanted to kill the men that had fired all of those good people, essentially ruining their lives. She wanted to torture them, to scrape their skin off slowly before no further example is necessary. They were dark, dark thoughts that Rosalie had pushed away for so many years, and without work to hide behind, they had returned. Rosalie felt more out of control than ever, and as these strange urges filled and abandoned her mind, and then filled it again, without warning, Rosalie desperately tried to keep her hold on reality. She was better than this, she could overcome this, she was determined. But she was more wary of people, and more in predator mode than she'd been in a long time. At night she would go to a bar with Emmett and Jasper and single out the evening's victim. She would manipulate them, push them, pull them, and bring them to their knees, and then fuck them and forget them. The way they'd play into her, falling for her tricks every time, worshipping her body and her beauty, it was so easy, so predictable, that she'd momentarily feel fully in control of her life again. Doing this gave her peace, it fed her dark urges somewhat, but suffice to say that the day she began to notice Bella, Rosalie was in no way in any condition to fall in love with anyone. And later that night, as Bella walked out to her yard and, noticing Rosalie stretched out lazily on the newly built chaise in her own yard, mustered up the courage to go over and talk to Rosalie, suffice to say that that night, Bella was in far more danger than she realized. The night Bella had ventured over to her side, Rosalie had been laying idly on the chaise, lost in her own thoughts. She heard the creak of the neighbor's back door and looked up, acknowledging that one of the girls that wasn't Alice had come outside, and she quickly traveled back into her own head. A quiet voice, actually a full-on timid voice, brought her out of her trance. "Hey," Bella said plainly, and Rosalie looked over to see the brunette from earlier that day standing in the entrance to her yard. Rosalie smiled insincerely but said nothing. "Can I come over? Would you mind, unless I'm interrupting or something?" "You looked lost in thought. What are you thinking?" That was a pretty personal question coming from a girl she barely knew. "Oh no, you're not interrupting anything," Rosalie thought to herself. "I was just picturing what it would be like to cut off a man's airway with a wire as I looked him in the eyes. Just thinking about what he'd look like as he died. You know, usual thoughts, no big deal, that's cool with you, right?" Rosalie couldn't help but chuckle at the idea of saying that. But Bella took the chuckle as an invitation and walked over, plopping herself on the second chaise, 2 feet across from Rosalie. "Oh fucking great, goddammit," Rosalie muffled an exasperated sigh as she realized the girl really actually intended to interrupt her alone time to talk about something banal and boring. If she wants to discuss guy trouble, I'm so out of here, fuck manners, she groused to herself. But Rosalie had manners, and they were so ingrained in her that she barely had to think before she uttered. "It's so nice of you to stop over. Can I get you a drink?" Ever the hostess, Rosalie had learned well from her patrician mother. She might think about slicing someone's jugular, but not before she at least offered him a gin and tonic. Sure," Bella responded, sounding a bit shaky. Rosalie noticed this and wondered if something was the matter with her. Actually, by the sound of her voice, she knew something was the matter. "Dear God, please don't tell me about your fucking boyfriend." But her feet carried her to the outdoor fridge. Emmett was the consummate partier, after all, and she offered Bella its contents. Bella chose a cold, perfectly cheap beer, and Rosalie inwardly noticed. She had lavish tastes, champagne taste, as her mother called it, but when it came to beer, Rosalie liked it light and cheap, no pretenses. Good call," she remarked, slipping the beer into a promotional cozy she'd gotten for a lacrosse tournament at least 10 years prior. She smiled, hoping to put the girl at ease, because for some reason she had the desire to put the girl at ease. She glided back to her chaise, noting that Bella took her body in somewhat obviously the entire time. She cracked the beer for Bella and handed it to her, smirking somewhat. "Oh thank you," Bella offered. "Opened and everything, full service around here, yeah." Oh, she was making a joke. "Always," Rosalie quipped back without a moment's hesitation. "So what's up, you look troubled." I just," Bella stumbled over her reply as her eyes raked over Rosalie's legs. She gulped, and then continued. "It's just, a really close friend of mine died this morning and my sister isn't home and I don't have anyone to talk to." She stared at her feet, suddenly finding her cheap 9 West flats very interesting. "Not that I want to talk to her anyway, I mean, she can just be, a little much." "Oh no, I'm so sorry. Rosalie wanted to say her name but she couldn't remember the damn thing. Hopefully it would come out in conversation. It was way too late to ask. This must be incredibly hard for you. It is, she replied, meeting Rosalie's eyes. Rosalie noted that her eyes were kind of interesting. I just feel so strange, like empty, but I'm not as sad as I feel like I should be, and I've never had to deal with this. Normally this kind of thing secretly pissed Rosalie off. She'd experienced so much death in her life. Along with the countless deaths of grandparents and uncles and mothers and fathers and siblings of friends. Rosalie first came face to face with death when one of her closest friends died of an asthma attack during football practice. Rosalie was 11, and the realization that people you loved could just disappear shook her to the core. Soon after, another friend was hit by a truck and lay in a coma for weeks before his parents pulled the plug. Rosalie was also, at that time, busy visiting her beloved grandmother, the only person that had ever stood up to her father and protected her, who had slowly succumbed to Alzheimer's and now lay as a babbling vegetable in a home close by. The icing on the cake for Rosalie was during her first year of prep school when her best friend since birth, the one person she confided in about the abuse at the hands of her father, hit a tree during a ski trip. It was a truly freak accident, but she had hit her head so hard that something in her brain ruptured. Rosalie was the first one in the woods to get her. They had been skiing in tandem, trying to make tracks like in the Warren Miller movies they loved, when she caught an edge and flew into the trees. Rosalie held her as she died in her arms. The rest of her teens years were plagued with loss, 2 uncles that had acted as her father figures, more friends, siblings of friends, etc., etc. She resigned herself to the fact that mortality was fleeting, and sometimes horrible things happened for no reason. But she struggled with the fear of the people she loved disappearing for years since, so she felt resentment to people her age, as Bella was, that were experiencing death for the first time. And not even someone that close, just a friend. Rosalie couldn't sympathize. But Bella looked so fragile, so sad, that Rosalie began to comfort her anyway, and they talked about her friend, and the feelings Bella was experiencing, for over an hour. How did you get to be so wise, especially at our age? Bella questioned her. I've dealt with a lot of loss, I guess you could say I have experience. She signed and looked directly into Bella's eyes. Everyone has their shit, it happens. I just got it earlier than most. But it doesn't diminish the pain when it happens again. That was a lie. Rosalie had learned to diminish the pain, to close off and not feel. But she wanted Belle to feel like her grief was important. She wanted to make the girl feel better. This desire was a bit strange for Rosalie. She looked Bella up and down. She was much prettier than Rosalie had first thought. Hidden behind that hair and those hideous work clothes was quite a beautiful girl. Decent body, Rosalie thought. Maybe I'll give her a pity fuck. But something in Bella's eyes told Rosalie no, that this girl might be worth more than that. She was oddly drawn to her. Rose, can I call you that? Okay, no one called Rosalie that. Not even her own brother. Rosalie hated that nickname, and for a good, but not worth getting into, reason. Calling her Rose was a sure way to get you on her shit list, and being on Rosalie's shit list wasn't pleasant. So Rosalie was caught off guard for a second by Bella's question, but it had sounded so sweet, so genuine, that Rosalie didn't want to be rude by refusing her. Yes, Rosalie responded. She liked to use as few words as necessary. It left people guessing, and it gave as little away about her as possible. During their conversation, she'd noticed that Bella was somewhat the same way. Most likely not for the same reasons, but regardless, Bella was careful with her words. She paused often, clearly reviewing what she was about to say before it spilled out. She didn't babble, unless she was nervous, which she was more than a few times during their chat, but for the most part, Bella seemed careful not to say the first thing that came to mind. This was slightly unusual, especially in New York, a city where everyone would forego listening in favor of just waiting for you to finish your sentence so that they could follow up with something smarter or more impressive. And, Rosalie noted, this was very unlike the other girl in their apartment, the other sister. Rosalie couldn't remember her name either. But she realized she liked that about this shy brunette. She respected that the girl was careful with her words. So this caused her to listen closer as she waited for Bella to continue. Rose. She looked down again. She seemed so unsure. Why was the girl so unsure? I just am really glad that I got to talk to you. She paused and looked up at Rosalie with a shy smile. I've wanted to for a long time, and even though this isn't really under the best of circumstances, I'm kind of glad it allowed me to come over here. Like, I want to get to know. What up, Stud? Emmett burst through the door, clearly home from work. Stud was his nickname for Rosalie. She often thought he might be more proud of her sexual conquests than she was. Oh hey Bella, what's up sexy? Emmett winked at her. Bella looked down uncomfortably. Dude, did I interrupt something intense? Bella, Rosalie repeated in her head. Okay, so it's Bella. Bella, Bella, Bella. I have to remember this. Yeah, dipshit. Rosalie beamed at him, feeling both annoyed and relieved by the interruption. One of Bella's close friends died this morning. God, you're an asshole. Rosalie laughed, hoping Bella picked up on her sarcasm. Bella couldn't help but chuckle and Rosalie was surprisingly relieved. Oh shit Bella, I'm so sorry, what happened? Cocaine overdose. I haven't really lost anyone important before, so it's weird. Bella paused, staring at those god-awful flats again. Have you? Oh yeah, well Emmett responded. Yeah, a lot actually. But Rosalie's had it way worse. I mean, her best friend died in her arms when she was only 14 and then godlike. Uncle Larry and Uncle Francis and her friend Cricket in that car accident and then Fletch and Harry and God before that her other best friend Russell just dropped dead of an asthma attack when they were only 11 and then Hunter and... Okay. Rosalie cut him off, trying not to sound irritated. I think she gets the picture. Rosalie was mortified. She did not want Bella knowing such intimate details about her. She knew she had to play it off and not give away how uncomfortable Emmett's verbal, barfing, had just made her. Oh my God Rose, I had no idea. Oh God, I must have sounded like such an ass. Again she had to cut someone off, this time Bella. Bella, don't be an idiot, that has nothing to do with you. Grief isn't a competition, okay? Just because you know about me, it doesn't change what we talked about, okay? Rosalie caught her square in the eye and was stunned by how significant their look felt. She couldn't help herself, so she leaned over to Bella and put a hand lightly on Bella's thigh, under the guise of comforting her. I'm so sorry about what happened, Bella. Bella had shuddered slightly when Rosalie's skin met hers, and now her eyes were transfixed on Rosalie's hand. Rosalie decided to push it even further by rubbing her thumb a bit. This clearly affected Bella, who looked startled and maybe even a little uncomfortable, but there was no reason to be. This was just a person comforting another person, right? Then Bella did something unexpected, and brought her hand over Rosalie's. Thanks Rose, she said softly. I'm going to hit the ladies' room and get a glass of wine, anyone interested? In the bathroom or the wine? Emmett quipped flirtatiously. Rosalie smirked at him as Bella walked off. Yoa retarded, Rosalie teased Emmett in her very best Boston accent. He teased back. Rosalie stared down at her hand like it was some strange object she'd never laid eyes on. It was tingling. From where Bella touched it. It was tingling. This was all getting a bit strange. Rose? Emmett questioned sarcastically. Since when do you let anyone ever call you Rose? Since right now, she sighed, exasperated. She asked me if she could call me Rose and I felt like I'd offend her if I said no, so whatever. Since when do you care if someone gets offended? He snarked the rebuttal back at her. Dude, her friend just died. Oh, and by the way, thanks asshole for revealing my whole life history. I was absolutely dying for her to know every secret, but just didn't know how to tell her myself. Her voice was a blend of sarcasm and ice, and it didn't go unnoticed. Sorry Rosalie, he said, actually being sincere. I just get annoyed when people talk in front of you about these ridiculous, insignificant things when I know you've been through so much. I just kind of wanted to put her in her place, you know. Rosalie did know what he meant. I just didn't want her to think that her life was just so horrible because some random friend died of too much blow. I mean, she's like 29 or something. Like, grow up. Emmett's sentiment surprised Rosalie. He'd always been awfully protective, but she didn't realize he was also almost as bitter about the losses they'd endured as she was. She could hear Bella puttering near her door, and decided to make an exit before the girl came back out. That was enough for one night, she mused. But she wanted to leave not just because of that, she also wanted to leave so that Bella would feel her absence. Without even realizing it, she'd already started trying to seduce Bella. Somehow the girl had gone from a nameless nobody to someone that had intrigued Rosalie more than she'd been intrigued in months, no years. all in the span of 10 hours. Rosalie said her good nights to Em and sauntered inside. Over the next few months, Rosalie and Bella grew closer. Rosalie found herself growing oddly interested in her. She was attracted to her, but more than that, she was actually starting to enjoy interacting with Bella. They would meet up on the chaises at night after Rosalie returned from the gym or an event or whatever, and they'd sip beer and share a cigarette and just talk. Rosalie knew that Bella wanted her. Her eyes raked over Rosalie every time she had the chance, making it almost painfully obvious. But other than that, she did nothing. No comments about how hot Rosalie was, no come-ons, nothing. It was strange, and Rosalie actually found herself growing frustrated. Everyone complimented her, everyone threw themselves at her. Why wasn't she? Rosalie wondered if she was shy or maybe scared or unsure, but the way she undressed Rosalie with her eyes on an almost constant basis told her differently. But in a way, the lack of come-ons was a relief. Rosalie began to relish the blatant stares, combined with the hesitant conversation. It was so seductive. Rosalie knew it was attracting her, but she couldn't help herself. As the weeks wore on, and Bella and Rosalie became closer and closer, Rosalie found herself so focused on her interactions with Bella that her dark thoughts would leave her for days at a time. She felt different, excited, and slightly out of control, but in a good way. And then sometimes she felt panicked and weird that this random girl seemed to have some kind of hold over her that she couldn't understand or explain away. But Bella was kind of addictive, and Rosalie couldn't bear to tear herself away. She knew Bella was at least attracted to her body, so she began to show it off, working out in front of her, wearing lower-cut cocktail dresses to events so that Bella would ogle her when she returned home. And it was working. Bella could barely form sentences when Rosalie was doing pull-ups, and she seemed to audibly gulp whenever Rose came home in another, even sexier, dress. Bella was actually so obvious that Emmett and Jasper picked up on it, and they teased Rosalie mercilessly for torturing Bella. But what they didn't realize was that Rosalie had started to want her back. As the months wore on, she started to want her more than anything. By the beginning of July, Bella was leaving her hand lightly in Rosalie's after she'd hand her a drink or pass a cigarette. In turn, Rosalie would intentionally leave her leg touching Bella's as they sat under the outdoor dining table. The touching became more and more frequent, and it was driving Rosalie crazy with want. She marveled at the fact that this girl could do such a thing to her. The subtle touches felt so hot on her skin. She couldn't get enough of them, and apparently, neither could Bella, because she seemed to find reasons to touch Rosalie to the point where it was comical. She was constantly playing with Rosalie's hair, or resting their legs together, or grabbing her hand and comparing their fingers, or dropping it lightly to her thigh. She couldn't sit without Bella's shoulder, accidentally pressed against hers, but she loved it, and had long foregone the chaise lounges for a bench at the outdoor table that could fit them both. But it wasn't just the touching that was driving Rosalie to the edge. The looks that they shared were growing more and more intense. Bella would catch her eyes and they would just look deeply at each other for what seemed like full minutes, neither one able to break the gaze. Bella would catch her eyes at their parties, during their dinners, when Emmett was talking, or Leah was talking, or basically when anyone was talking. And when they talked to each other, they stared so deeply that sometimes even Rosalie, who could handle anything, would be forced to look away. By the end of July, Rosalie was putting her arm around Bella protectively anytime someone teased her, or when she wanted to prove a point, or really anything that seemed like a quasi-legitimate reason for a friend to put their arm around another friend. But Bella and Rosalie were not friends. She knew it, and knew it was only a matter of time before they wouldn't be able to help themselves. However, Rosalie, for reasons she couldn't quite grasp, refused to push the relationship along, even though she knew she was fully capable of switching herself into her predator mode and seducing Bella into her bed in a matter of minutes. But she didn't want it that way. She didn't want Bella that way. Some part of her wanted this to feel more real. She wanted it to be natural. This strange new Rosalie was emerging that actually didn't want to have control. Well, sometimes, at least. Other times she agonized over what was happening to her, rehashing her fears over and over in her mind. But seeing Bella, and seeing her almost every night at this point, was keeping Rosalie from going to her dark place, keeping her out of her own head. During those months, Bella had shared what seemed like everything with Rosalie. She was, not surprisingly, much more of an open book, and she volunteered her fears, and her dreams, and her feelings up to Rosalie willingly, except that she didn't entirely. Bella had a boyfriend named Edward, who was never around, But when Bella spoke of her relationship with him, she lied. She talked about how much she cared about him, how perfect he was, and nice, and fun, when Rosalie could easily see how much he bored her. She broke plans with him whenever she could, seemingly avoiding him at all costs, and when he was at the apartment, Bella followed Rosalie around like a dog. At parties she affixed herself to Rosalie and completely ignored Edward. Rosalie knew what this was. Bella was either in complete denial about her feelings for Rosalie and trying to convince herself through words that Edward was the right person to be with, or she was just denying it to Rosalie. Rosalie wasn't entirely sure, but hoped for the latter. Straight girls in denial were hard work, and Rosalie didn't think Bella would be able to keep her interest if she ventured down that slope. Because Rosalie really did want to stay interested. She found Bella fascinating. There was something about her that Rosalie couldn't pull away from. She wasn't the smartest or most interesting, and certainly not the most experienced or cultured person Rosalie had ever met, but even when their conversations were totally banal, she couldn't seem to unhook herself. On a day in early August, things changed. It was August 8th actually, a Saturday. They'd gone to Coney Island on a whim. Bella, Leah's 4 very annoying friends, and Rosalie. Normally, Rosalie would have been too embarrassed to be seen with anyone but Bella, and had, of course, refused to take a subway to the grossest beach on planet Earth. But Bella had whined and begged, and during Rosalie's 4th emphatic no, Bella dropped her hand to Rosalie's thigh and moved it ever so slightly inward. As if this wasn't enough, her eyes searched Rosalie's deeply as she began to run her fingers up and down Rosalie's mid, almost inner, thigh. "God, your muscles are crazy," she said. "Your body is insane." To her own embarrassment, Rosalie gulped audibly. It was the first real compliment Bella had given her. And her hand on Rosalie's thigh, the direct eye contact. Bella was making her intentions known. At least Rosalie hoped she was. "Dirty pool, Bella, dirty pool." Rosalie rolled her eyes. "A subway to Coney Island," Rosalie mused. "You've got to be kidding me." Needless to say, soon after she found herself on the D train staring at the 4 catty losers that Leah had brought along as they berated Rosalie with questions about the fashion world, or her summer home, or why she wasn't working, or who did her highlights. These girls were all marginally attractive, clueless bitches, and not surprisingly, they were obviously intimidated by Rosalie. For the duration of what was a ridiculously long subway ride, Leah and her dork pack continued to subtly snipe at her, trying to big time her with pointless stories about some celebrity they knew or blah blah. Normally girls like this would have irritated Rosalie enough to warrant some kind of rebuttal, especially since none of them seemed to be very nice to Bella. But with Bella resting her head on Rosalie's shoulder, pretending to be sleepy, a hand, hidden by her beach bag, resting on Rosalie's thigh again, Rosalie could have cared less. Bella was wearing a soft gray cotton t-shirt with a Florida Gators logo on it. The girl loved college football. Something Rosalie didn't even try to comprehend, and the muted gray of the shirt actually enhanced her soft brown eyes. She had on the pair of white shorts, slightly worn and ratty, but on Bella, they looked good. At least, in Rosalie's eyes they did. Over the past few months, Rosalie had found herself caring less and less about the girl's wardrobe, and even though this may sound ridiculous, for Rosalie this was a big deal. She was critical by nature when it came to fashion, but with Bella it had stopped mattering. She didn't care what the girl was wearing, as long as she was there. As Bella kept herself firmly affixed to Rosalie during the horrifically endless ride to that tacky beach, Rosalie wondered to herself why she didn't just make her move on Bella. Rosalie Hale had never felt so shy or unsure about another person in her life. Why couldn't she just be the predator that she was and take her? And God, why does going this slow feel so incredibly exciting? These tiny, shy touches alone had driven her want Bella more than she'd ever wanted anyone in her life. And the 2 girls had barely even held hands, or ever verbally acknowledged any feelings that could have possibly grown between them. Not that Rosalie would have wanted that, of course. But as they exited the train into a mass of people, Bella leaned up and kissed her jaw softly. It was a sneaky kiss, too quick for her sister or her minions to see, but it happened. So as they made their way into a teeming throng of tattooed masses on the boardwalk, Rosalie instinctively grabbed Bella's hand. She held it for a few minutes, and dropped it as soon as they hit a clearing. She wanted to see what Bella would do. As soon as their hands had touched, the electricity coursed through Rosalie. The feeling of holding her hand as they maneuvered through the crowd was amazing to her. It was like she could feel every part of Bella's hand, each pad on her fingers, each line in her palm. And each tiny spot where they connected sent adrenaline coursing through her body. "I'm turned on by hand-holding," Rosalie mused. But she didn't chuckle to herself. She was too far gone to laugh at her own ridiculous emotions. All she could think about was Bella, and the feeling that connection had given her. As she broke the connection and dropped her hand, she watched as Bella bit her lower lip in that incredibly endearing way that she did when she was nervous or unsure, and even that gave Rosalie another rush. Rosalie looked away in a disinterested manner, trying in vain to regain her composure, but she could feel Bella's eyes boring into her. Rosalie Hale, the girl who wouldn't even so much as brush her teeth without calculating and weighing the ramifications of the action, was so caught up in the intensity of wanting Bella that her emotions were overriding her nature to the point that she truly no longer cared. Bella was everything. All she could see. She knew that eventually nothing in the world would stop her from moving forward, from finding out what was going to happen next. And as she turned back to meet Bella's eyes, she knew that something major was finally going to happen. Bella's eyes were so filled with want it was almost unbearable. Rosalie wasn't sure, but she thought she might have actually physically shuddered as those deep, haunting chocolate orbs caught her own. And as she watched Bella draw in a shaky breath as they gazed at each other, in that moment Rosalie was certain that the beautiful girl next to her felt the same. As they all suffered in line waiting to buy beer and hot dogs, Bella told her sister she wasn't feeling well, and announced to the group that she needed some air. They were, of course, already outside. Her eyes bore into Rosalie's as she asked her, point blank and in front of everyone, if she'd please come with her. Rosalie hastily accepted, shoving a few $100 bills into Leah's hand and ordering her to treat everyone. Bella's hand latched instantly to Rosalie's, and she clung tightly, dragging Rosalie through the crowd. When they reached an impasse, Bella leaned back into Rosalie, slightly pressing their bodies together, and spoke in her ear. "I think I'm having a panic attack. I need you to calm me down." Rosalie was stunned. It was a total lie. Bella was fine. But she was creating an excuse for Rosalie to comfort her. Rosalie was finally able to snap out of her trance, and Bella's words caused her to chuckle to herself. "God, we're both such chicken shits it's hysterical. Neither of us can say what we want. It's probably going to be years before either of us ever makes a move." Rosalie had no idea why she was waiting anymore. She bit her lip and steeled herself, finally mustering the courage to change things. Bella leaned back even further, pressing her soft, slim body into Rosalie's front to the point that Rosalie's breasts had made more than light contact with the smaller girl's back. As she waited for the crowd to move enough to create an opening, Rosalie leaned into her, moving the arm that was attached to Bella's forward and around Bella's waist, embracing her from behind. "Don't be scared," she murmured. "I'll take care of you, okay?" Rosalie was more than willing to play into Bella's ruse. Bella turned her head back to meet Rosalie's eyes, and their lips were so close that they almost touched. Inches apart, Bella breathed out, "Okay," as she licked her lips. "Oh God," Rosalie groaned inwardly as she thought to herself, "the moment for being tentative so needs to be over." As gross as the setting was, with her lips so close to Bella's, Rosalie judgment was more than a bit impaired, and she thought that if their first kiss was on a boardwalk in Coney Island, so be it. She was about to lean in the last few inches, when a strong hand gripped her shoulder, yanking her back. "What up, sluts?" Leah shouted dramatically, already in full party mode. Rosalie groaned and rolled her eyes, but quickly composed herself and turned to face the interrupting offender with a smirk on her face. Leah shoved 2 shots at the 2 girls, and Rosalie winked at Bella while she tossed hers back, thinking that a little liquid courage might be exactly what they both needed. Bella tossed hers back as well and threw the plastic shooter on the ground haphazardly, clearly trying to impress Rosalie with her own coolness. And Rosalie was impressed with Bella, but for very different reasons. "So you sluts ready to party?" Leah whooped, her pack of friends gathering around them. God, how Rosalie hated that type of vernacular. It was so pedestrian, so Jersey Shore. She had no intention of ignoring such a class-less query. "Leah," Rosalie spoke calmly, evenly, looking slightly downward so that she could meet the girl's eyes. "Just so we're clear, A, I'm always ready to party, so asking that is irrelevant." This earned a chuckle and a hand squeeze from Bella. "And B, you sound utterly tasteless when you refer to me, or anyone else, as a slut. You sound like a piece of trash." Leah's mouth hung open, and it was entirely unflattering on her. Now I know you're not a piece of trash, Rosalie continued, but if you call me that again I won't hesitate to throw you in a dumpster filled with real garbage. Do you understand me? Rosalie was completely serious. This girl was entirely beneath her and seemed to be forgetting her station quickly. Leah was clearly miffed and embarrassed, and to add insult to injury, a pair of very attractive girls made their way into the circle and right up to Rosalie. "We're so sorry to bother you," they said in unison, "but you're the girl from the old Ralph Lauren ads, right? Rosalie Hale." Rosalie flashed them a brilliant smile, hardly believing the good fortune of being able to remind Leah even more of who she was dealing with, while also being able to flirt in front of Bella in an attempt to make her jealous. She continued to smile brightly as she introduced herself and chatted with the two girls, one of whom began to come on to her almost immediately, mentioning how she was straight but had always said to her friends that a girl who looked like Rosalie could turn her in an instant. Rosalie laughed seductively, but was cut off as Bella yanked her arm. "Rosalie, I feel so sick, we have to go." "Of course you do," Rosalie thought to herself as she rolled her eyes, but secretly she was thrilled with Bella's reaction. Bella shot a quick glare at Rosalie and took off, but not before grabbing 4 more shots from Leah and a lunchbox cooler filled with beer. Without even a chance to excuse herself, Rosalie went off after Bella, who was rapidly disappearing into the crowd. Leah and her friends were left in the dust, snickering to themselves about what an arrogant bitch Rosalie was. Rosalie was tall, but not tall enough to see Bella over the throngs of people, so she just moved as fast as was possible in the direction Bella had seemed to be headed. The crowd appeared to be endless, and refused to break up even as Rosalie pushed farther and farther down the boardwalk and toward the pier. Finally, she seemed to reach the end, although she was now far, far away from Leah's group, and with spotty cell phone service, had no way to reach Bella, whom she couldn't see. She ran further, turning heads in her tight white shorts and embroidered polo, a sweep of blonde hair flowing behind her as she broke into a sprint. Finally, she caught sight of Bella's gray t-shirt far up under the secluded pier, and she slowed to a jog. Upon reaching Bella, Rosalie looked back and realized that they were at least a half a mile away from the crowd. Bella was in the shade under the pier, still glaring at her. Rosalie came to a stop, saying nothing and catching her breath. Despite the anger her expression held, Bella couldn't help but stare at the sweat glistening on her body as Rosalie pulled her pink polo over her head, striping down to her white bikini top and her own, much shorter, white shorts. Finally, Bella moved her, for lack of a more modest term, "fuck me," eyes of hers up to meet Rosalie's, and her gaze was piercing. Bella spoke no words, but handed Rosalie 2 of the 4 shots she'd been carrying. Rosalie raised an eyebrow at her, having no idea what to make of this strange behavior. Bella threw 2 of her own back in record time, and Rosalie glared at her, sighed dramatically, and threw hers back as well. She knew this was ridiculous. She hated shots, and getting drunk during the daytime was always regretful, but with Bella she couldn't control herself. In fact, she seemed to be willing to do almost anything. Bella turned her back to Rosalie and headed down the beach, staying in the shade of the pier. Rosalie could do nothing but follow, perplexed and intrigued, and annoyingly, also kind of turned on. Push and pull manipulation. That was Rosalie's specialty, not Bella's, and yet in the past few minutes it felt to Rosalie that the tables had been completely turned, and surprisingly, she didn't mind. Halfway down to the water's edge, Rosalie decided she could take no more of this follow-me wordlessly behavior, so she closed the gap between them and yanked the lunchbox from Bella's hand. It stunned Bella momentarily, and Rosalie took that time to smirk at Bella and grab her hand. She wove their fingers together and pulled Bella the rest of the way to the water. Bella plopped down on the sand and zipped open the lunchbox, cracking a beer before Rosalie even had time to settle herself next to her. "Thirsty today, are we?" Rosalie raised an eyebrow at her. "Yeah, I guess I am," was her curt reply. Rosalie refused to acknowledge that Bella was angry with her. Bella didn't get to have that kind of control. Not to mention there was absolutely no real reason to be angry with her. Rosalie reached out for her hand. Bella yanked it out of her grasp. "Oh no you don't, I don't think so, Bella," Rosalie taunted as she tackled Bella, grabbing both of her wrists and pinning them on her sides. Bella struggled mightily, trying desperately to get free but beginning to giggle as she tried in vain to control Rosalie's movements. "Listen you little boozehound," Rosalie was tickling her now. "Stop," Bella pleaded as she wiggled, laughing so hard she could barely catch her breath. She was very ticklish. Oh, I'm not going to stop until you agree to start talking to me, little one. And I'm much stronger than you, so don't waste your energy struggling. Bella jerked forward and bit Rosalie on the shoulder playfully, causing Rosalie to scream in mock horror. All of a sudden she felt Bella's lips replace her teeth, and she froze. The moment she felt those soft, full lips pressing on her tan skin, Rosalie's stomach dropped. What are you doing? She whispered. Kissing it to make it better? Bella asked questioningly. Her face was so close to Rosalie's. In fact, her lips were now so close that Rosalie instinctively licked her own and held her breath. Bella moved even closer, and Rosalie felt those hot puffs of air on her waiting mouth. Tiny, insignificant breaths that they were. To Rosalie, it was like they were electrically charged. In that moment, she felt like she was on fire. They were so close. And then all of a sudden Bella was gone. Rosalie blinked and looked up. Bella was sitting next to her, drinking her beer as if nothing had even happened. Rosalie collected herself for a second and then pulled herself up next to Bella, stretching her legs out in front of her languidly and kicking her flip-flops off, forcing herself to act just as nonplussed as Bella. But the silence between them was dragging, the awkwardness becoming palpable. Think, Rosalie urged herself, think of something to say, anything. She bit her lip and looked down at the sand. So you totally ditched your sister, you know? God, years of exemplary training, an Ivy League degree, an IQ off the charts, and that was all she could come up with? Yeah, they seemed kind of worth ditching though, you know? Bella was also staring down at the sand, finding it clearly fascinating. What happened to you back there? Rosalie questioned her, unable to help herself. Bella sighed, continuing to stare at all those tiny little grains. Sometimes I just can't take it, you know? She paused, taking a deep breath. Sometimes I feel like I have everything under control, but then all of a sudden it's like my life is caving in on me, like everything is going to hell. It's like I go from being able to control everything, to all of a sudden controlling nothing. I know the feeling, Rosalie thought, rolling her eyes and letting out a sigh of her own. So I freak out, Bella continued, and I run away from it all. Yeah, literally, Rosalie snarked. Oh please Rose, you're like an Olympic-level athlete or something, I knew you could keep up. Junior Olympics, Rosalie mused. On skis. Definitely doesn't count. You're not so bad yourself, Rosalie retorted. You were like a ninja darting in and out of that crowd. Yeah, Bella smirked, looking up at Rosalie. Maybe I've got more moves than you give me credit for. Rosalie's breath caught in her throat. They were caught in another one of those stares again. This time Bella licked her lips. Those eyes were absolutely killing Rosalie. They were completely mesmerizing. And apparently, they could also completely block her ability to form cohesive sentences. The tension surrounding them was insane. Neither of them had ever let it get this far before. Rosalie should have been the one who could handle it. She could practically teach a class on Seduction 101, but not surprisingly at this point, she was the first to back down. It's going to be okay, Bella. Rosalie tried to sound comforting. She reached out to rub her legs soothingly. I'm sorry you got upset. Yeah. Bella said nothing more, and instead stared at Rosalie's hand. She was still rubbing Bella's leg. Bella caught her hand and stopped it. They both stared down. The waves rolled in and out a few feet farther out, drowning all other noise. The air was salty and thick, and it mingled with Bella's shampoo as the breeze sent the mix swirling around the two girls. Rosalie closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, tilting her head back but keeping her hand on Bella's leg. And Bella's own hand remained top of hers. Rosalie tried to lose herself in the sounds and smells of her surroundings, not sure in this moment if she could handle another tense, almost but not quite, moment between them. But she was snapped back to the moment when she felt Bella move her hand. Very slightly, almost imperceptibly, she was moving Rosalie's hand inward, towards the soft flesh of her inner thigh. Rosalie could do nothing but watch, helpless and fascinated. Bella rubbed her thumb over Rosalie's hand. It was getting so close to that inappropriate spot on the leg where platonic touching is not allowed. So close. Rosalie inched her thumb out. And finally, the invisible boundary between friends and something more was crossed. And then she was there, her hand touching smooth skin in an area that there was no going back from. This was so undeniably a moment, and Rosalie understood finally and completely that Bella did want the same thing. She wanted Rosalie. Secretly she had still been so unsure, So afraid to make a move and get rejected, and so afraid to lose the relationship they already had, that her brain had refused to act. But now she knew, for sure. Her hand was there, with Bella's on top, and they both continued to stare at it, frozen for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Rosalie broke it. She lifted the tips of her fingers and ghosted the pads over thin, creamy skin. She heard Bella suck in a breath, and she lifted her head. Bella was still staring down, watching now as the fingers that conveyed such clearly non-platonic intentions moved beneath her own hand. Rosalie reached out with her other hand and trailed her fingers down Bella's jaw, stopping at her chin. "Bella," she breathed, lifting her chin and bringing her to eye level. Bella's eyes were boring into Rosalie. By now they seemed to be always boring into Rosalie, searching, questioning. And now, Rosalie could see, they were again totally filled with desire. Rosalie leaned in slowly, so slowly, wanting to savor this moment as long as she could. Bella began to tilt her head, readying herself for what was to come. With one last glance, Rosalie broke their gaze and closed her eyes, trailing her fingers behind Bella's ear as she closed the gap. Their lips pressed tentatively, lightly. God, even that slight touch felt so amazing to Rosalie. She leaned in again, kissing Bella a little harder. Bella's lips were so soft, and she pressed them to Rosalie gently, but with clear intention. After the third time their lips met in this cautious embrace, Rosalie pulled her other hand from Bella's thigh and brought it to her waist. Bella moaned at the contact, chaste as it was, and Rosalie could no longer contain herself. She pressed her lips to Bella's with urgency and force, pulling Bella into her. Bella kissed her back, bringing her own hands to Rosalie's face and cupping her cheeks as she kissed her equally as hard. Rosalie sighed into the kiss as she felt Bella's warm body press against hers, and clearly the sigh sent Bella over her own edge, as all of a sudden Rosalie felt a smooth tongue trace her bottom lip, requesting entrance that was long overdue. Rosalie quickly granted it, but before she could make another move Bella's hands were snaking into her hair as she kissed her deeply and with more passion than Rosalie thought she had ever felt in her life. Rosalie groaned and kissed back, sucking on her tongue, and using her strong hands to move their bodies together in perfect rhythm with their lips. She pulled Bella in even deeper to her, pressing them as tightly together as she could while her hands guided Bella's hips. Bella let out her own little moan, and scratched her nails on Rosalie's scalp. It felt amazing. Everything felt amazing. Bella could kiss like no one she'd ever met. "Oh my God," Bella almost panted, gasping for air. "I feel like I'm on fire right now." "Rose, what are you doing to me?" Rosalie's only response was to kiss her again with as much passion as she'd ever mustered. Her mind was blank, consumed only with Bella, with kissing Bella, right here, right now. She kissed her deeply, then tenderly, almost lovingly, then deeper again. As they fell deeper into a tantalizing rhythm, the two girls barely broke for air, simply too absorbed with the feel of each other to bother. Rosalie slowly lowered Bella back onto the sand, and they lay on top of each other, and then side by side, and then sitting up again, then back down, over and over. Bella kissed her with tremendous intensity, never allowing Rosalie to take total control, making sure to do her own fair share of exploring and learning. They stayed like this for what must have been hours, as all of a sudden it was dusk and they were still laying there, facing each other on the sand, kissing slowly and deeply as Rosalie's strong hands rubbed Bella's back and Bella's hands ran all over Rosalie's arms, her back, her thighs, her face, her hair everywhere. This was so perfect. Rosalie knew it was fucked up and dangerous, and she'd certainly ruin it, but right now she didn't care, because it felt perfect. Utterly and completely perfect. An hour later, Rosalie realized that it was now almost completely dark. But the lights of the pier and the full moon rising in front of them had washed over them, and they laid there kissing as they were bathed in a strange version of boardwalk moonlight. "Bella," Rosalie whispered, pulling away only slightly. Bella only responded by seeking her lips out again and attempting to pull Rosalie in deeply. Rosalie allowed her for a second, but realizing that making out on the sand in a remote part of Coney Island after dark wasn't exactly the safest idea, she reluctantly broke the kiss. "Bella," she relented. "We have to go, come on." Bella huffed, clearly frustrated, but Rosalie ignored her and pulled her up anyway, just in time to see a lone man approaching them. He was about 30 feet away and moving fast, and as soon as Bella noticed him she grabbed Rosalie's arm tightly. "Great," Rosalie thought sarcastically as she rolled her eyes. "Mugged at Coney Island. Just fucking perfect." but she wasn't nervous. Not in the slightest. Rosalie pushed Bella behind her, keeping herself between Bella and the intruder. She sized him up so she could figure out what to do. It was a young-ish guy, maybe 25 to 30, and he was shirtless, holding his shirt in front of him in a manner that looked like he was hiding a weapon. Rosalie saw a small point sticking out, probably a knife. And now Rosalie wasn't afraid at all. In fact, she began walking towards the man. "Rose," Bella hissed, but Rosalie ignored her. "Hey buddy," she said firmly to the man, who was only about 5 feet away. "You can slow down, you know, we aren't going to run." The man looked a little perplexed at Rosalie's surely unexpected comment, but he composed himself quickly. He jerked the t-shirt concealed weapon in the air in a stabbing motion and growled. "Give me your fucking purses, your jewelry, and whatever else you have on you." Rosalie heard Bella gasp, but she just smirked at the man. "Oh come on, dude, really?" She laughed. Rosalie loved these moments. She loved the feeling of total control. Certain situations did scare Rosalie. This situation, however, wasn't one of them. "Give me your purses or what, huh?" She raised her hands up in a sarcastic gesture. "Come on, you can do better than that. And put your shirt on, you look like an idiot." The guy was stunned, clearly not expecting this kind of response. "You better fucking do it, or I'll slice you and your little girlfriend over there up." "Oh, so you caught the show then, huh?" Rosalie sneered at him. "Great, so you're a total perv, that's just great." She moved forward, getting right in his face, and before he could react, she slammed her fist right into his trachea, sending him reeling backward and fighting for air. "Jesus Christ, Rosalie, what the hell are you doing?" Bella Whisper shouted at her from behind, her voice laced with fear. "Stay back, Bella," Rosalie ordered, her tone official and commanding. She marched forward toward the stunned man and firmly yanked the t-shirt from his hands, revealing what it had been covering. A plastic knife. From a concession stand. "A plastic knife, douchebag, really?" Rosalie questioned sarcastically. The man was still trying to get his breath back. He was backing away. "Get the fuck out of here," Rosalie quipped, her voice casual, almost jovial. "And you, take a shower once in a while, this shirt smells like shit." She threw the shirt down disgustedly. She could sense Bella's relief and felt her drawing closer to her, but the man wasn't far enough away yet for Rosalie to take her eyes off him. She stuck her hand back, motioning for Bella to stop, and kept her eyes trained on her target. The man continued to back up, but his posture seemed to shift. Suddenly, his movements changed abruptly, and he lumbered forward, shouting obscenities. Rosalie charged right back at him and threw her weight into his torso as she swept her leg behind him in one fluid motion. He was thrown flat on his back. With Bella around, Rosalie didn't want to take any more chances, so she swiftly kicked him in the groin hard. "Now stay down, you pain in my ass." As the guy groaned in agony, Rosalie whipped a $20 bill out of her back pocket and threw it on him dismissively. "There you go. Go buy yourself a clean shirt, asshole." Now sure he would stay down, she walked backwards and grabbed a stunned Bella. The man found his voice somehow. "If I ever see you again, I swear to God I'll fucking kill you, Punta," he rasped at her, but his voice was filled with pain instead of menace. Rosalie turned to Bella, who was still getting over her initial shock, and grinned at her. "It's okay, Bella," she whispered. "This guy is a joke, I promise." Bella looked back at her in awe, causing Rosalie to puff up her chest a little. She chuckled to herself, this was getting pretty funny. "Don't worry, Bella, I'm really macho." Rosalie grinned wider at Bella and winked. She turned back but heard Bella chuckle, albeit nervously, as well. Rosalie was a lot of things, but macho wasn't really the best way to describe a blonde, slender former Ralph Lauren model. The guy continued to curse under his breath as he rolled on the ground, clutching his groin. "Did you hear me, you cocky bitch?" he rasped again. Rosalie rolled her eyes. "Wow, cocky wasn't a word I was expecting from you, but thanks, I'll take it." The man's cursing was getting louder, as she was clearly pissing him off even more. He opened his mouth to make another threat, but Rosalie cut him off. Okay, I'll make sure to watch out for you, I promise," she conceded, readying herself to run. "Just make to wear a shirt next time, buddy. I don't want my beautiful girlfriend," she wrapped her arm around Bella protectively, "to see those man boobs and realize your tits might actually be bigger than mine." With that, Rosalie flashed him her biggest smile and took off, tugging Bella behind her. "Oh my God, Rosalie Hale, Bella giggled as they ran together down the beach. You are completely insane. Completely and utterly insane. She laced her fingers with Rosalie's and laughed breathlessly. She kept babbling as they sprinted to the lights of the boardwalk. I mean, that guy could have killed us. I was ready to hand over everything. And you tell him his shirt smells and call him a douchebag? Who are you? Oh, you have no idea, Rosalie grinned. Seriously though, how did you know you could get away with that? Bella chided her, half joking but also half admonishing her. She was still pretty shocked by the whole encounter. Bella, you grow up in New York, you learn some tricks, Rosalie winked at her. Like if a shirtless guy is still hiding a weapon. When he's 30 feet from you and 1,000 feet from any other witnesses, odds are, it's probably a plastic knife. Or a fork. Or, she poked Bella in the ribs, a finger. They reached the busy boardwalk and civilization, and Bella swung Rosalie around and pressed her into the wooden railings. Although she was much stronger, Rosalie easily let the smaller girl maneuver her back against the hard wood. You, Bella pointed her finger, poking into Rosalie's chest, could, she pushed harder, she took her free hand and buried it in Rosalie's hair. Gotten, Rosalie wrapped her arms around Bella, pulling her closer. Me. Bella leaned in and nipped at Rosalie's bottom lip, killed. Bella tried to capture Rosalie in a kiss, but Rosalie pulled back. Bella, I would never, ever let anything happen to you. She searched Bella's eyes, trying to impress upon her how serious she was. I swear. Somehow Rose, I believe you. Bella smiled sweetly. Rosalie Hale, my hero. She leaned in, nipping Rosalie's lip again. Now kiss me, please. Rosalie couldn't deny her. She wondered in that moment if she'd ever be able to deny her anything. She leaned in, pressing her soft lips against Bella's lightly as her hands cupped Bella's flushed cheeks and she ran her thumbs over the girl's delicate skin at the apex of her jaw and cheekbones. Bella exhaled, her gentle breath spreading warmth over Rosalie's lips and also seemingly, warmth in Rosalie found much farther down. The residual adrenaline from their encounter with the stranger on the beach seemed to possess both girls, and they began to push into each other aggressively. The soft initial contact turned immediately into a desperate clench as Rosalie's tongue found Bella's, and they kissed forcefully. Rosalie moaned as Bella pulled her lower back into her, driving her tongue into Rosalie's waiting mouth, kissing Rosalie with an intensity that caused her knees to buckle. To anyone that thought they knew Rosalie, this would have been a very unexpected sight. A smaller, slight brunette holding the uncannily beautiful, powerful blonde tightly, her delicate hands basically keeping Rosalie from collapsing as they affixed to her lower back, holding her up. To know Rosalie and watch as Bella pressed her into the railing and kissed her with all she was worth, would have been strange indeed. Surely anyone in Rosalie's life, as they watched her desperately dig her fingers into Bella's scalp as she tried to bring Bella as close as possible, all while whimpering helplessly as the other girl almost consumed her. Surely anyone would have doubted that this was indeed Rosalie Hale that they were watching. But this was Rosalie Hale, allowing herself to be taken and kissed within an inch of her life, right in the midst of the chaos of an evening on the Coney Island boardwalk. When Rosalie broke the kiss after a full 5 minutes, she was actually panting. Bella's eyes were almost black as she too gasped for air. Rosalie rested her head in the crook of Bella's neck and tried to regain composure, but found it nearly impossible. All she could feel was the heat from Bella's body in every place that had touched her own, and that heat prevented any coherent thought from forming. God, Bella. She breathed heavily, unable to form another sentence. They stayed like that for another minute, neither able to really move, entirely oblivious to the crowd around them. Luckily, the crowd was oblivious as well. Coney Island during the summer months is a zoo of oddities and bizarre behavior, and two girls making out passionately on the boardwalk after dark is hardly a rare occurrence. But this was a rare occurrence. This was no alcohol-fueled, fumbling make-out, although there had been booze. Something was happening to both girls, something major was transpiring, and anyone that had been coherent enough to notice Bella and Rosalie clinging desperately to each other that night would have unwittingly been witness to the solidification of a powerful connection that the two girls had been forming. And this kiss on that night would ultimately prove to be perhaps the definitive moment in both of their lives. Certainly for Rosalie, what she gave to Bella when she unwittingly gave in to Bella during that kiss was something she'd never given to anyone before in her life. Rosalie let Bella hold her for that minute. Let Bella stroke her back and rub her arms and kiss her head as she gasped for both oxygen and lucidity. Her normally self-reflective nature had abandoned her. She didn't have room in her brain to think about the ramifications of what she was allowing to happen. It didn't matter what it meant to her, or about her. All that mattered was the feeling of this other person pressed against her. As she felt Bella's lips against her head again, Rosalie turned slightly and allowed her own lips to press lightly against Bella's neck, as she willed her own hands to run down Bella's back and rest in the space between the waistline of Bella's shorts and the smooth skin underneath. "You're so beautiful," Bella whispered into her hair. She cupped Rosalie's face and brought her up to meet her eyes. Surely she must have seen the vulnerability in Rosalie's darkened gaze as the taller girl looked slightly down at her. Bella leaned in to meet Rosalie's lips with her own, gently and surprisingly tentatively given how aggressive she'd been with her just moments prior. But if Bella had missed the vulnerability in Rosalie's eyes, she certainly didn't miss the shy smile that spread across the blonde's swollen, perfect lips when they broke apart, and Bella again whispered, "Rose, you are so beautiful." "As are you," Rosalie whispered back quietly, unable to break her smile as she watched Bella bite her lower lip self-consciously. "God, Bella," Rosalie repeated from before, hoping this time to form some kind of cohesive thought that would allow her to continue. "If I'd known that you would have kissed me like that, I would have taken you for a late-night walk in Washington Heights or Spanish Harlem months ago." Bella laughed, her voice melodious and sweet. She moved her hands to Rosalie's back and resumed her gentle strokes as they gazed at one another. Although Rosalie was no longer nestled in Bella's neck, they were still pressed tightly against one another, and Rosalie leaned down to again press a kiss to her pulse point. She dragged her lower lip against the soft skin as she moved higher to press another soft kiss to the sensitive spot just below the hairline behind her ear. Rosalie's breath came in slow, warm puffs as she lightly kissed her earlobe while dragging her fingertips over Bella's sides as she moved her hands from her lower back. She began to softly stroke the girl's stomach as she took the lobe into her mouth and ran it between the lengths of her lips. Bella gasped, stilling her motions and clutching Rosalie tightly. "Bella." Rosalie let the name roll off her tongue seductively. The girl whimpered a bit. "Blla," she repeated even slower, Bella's lobe still resting on her lower lip as she pulled her hands slightly away from where they had been stroking the covered flesh of Bella's stomach so that now only the tips of her fingers touched her. Bella was awaiting Rosalie's next move with literally bated breath, and Rosalie could feel every part of her tense up. Rosalie continued as she let her tongue trace the shell of her ear, eliciting another gasp and a strong pull on her lower back. Bella was pulling her so close that it was almost painful. Rosalie moved down to her lips, dragging her own across the girl's cheek on the way. She kissed her softly, still stroking Bella's upper abs and ribs with her fingertips, and slid her tongue across Bella's lips and into her mouth. Their tongues rubbed together once, twice, and then a third time before Rosalie pulled away. Bella again moaned in frustration. Rosalie loved that Bella seemed to make her displeasure at the loss of contact always so known. Rosalie puffed air on her lips a final time. Bella tried to swoop in to capture Rosalie, but she stayed just out of reach. "I want to get almost mugged with you on a regular basis if it means you'll kiss me like you did just then." In that same second, Rosalie let the fingertips that had been dancing across Bella's ribcage go to work, and Bella let out a shriek as Rosalie began to tickle her mercilessly. "Rosalie!" she yelled as she squirmed away, giggling uncontrollably. "Rosalie Hale, you are such a fucker." She tried to swat Rosalie's evil fingers away, but Rosalie caught her by the wrist and flipped them around so that Bella was now trapped by the same railing she pressed Rosalie up against just a few minutes prior. Rosalie was laughing joyfully as Bella squirmed, her right hand still torturing Bella as her left held the shaking brunette's wrist behind her back. "You're so dead, Rosalie. I'm going to smack you so hard." Bella tried in vain to smack Rosalie's arm, but the taller girl captured it as well as she laughed hysterically. Bella, come on. I thought you were like a ninja," Rosalie teased as she maneuvered the freshly caught wrist down behind Bella's back to join its partner. "Rose." Bella whined through giggles as Rosalie resumed her torture, both of Bella's wrists now held firmly behind Bella's back. "Rose, stop, you're so awful. This isn't fair." She struggled and wriggled in an attempt to free herself. You're so freaking strong." "Come on, Blla," Rosalie teased flirtatiously as she leaned in to within centimeters of Bella's lips. "I thought you said you had all these moves I didn't give you credit for." She pecked the squirming girl on the lips and then let her fingers dance up to the bottom of Bella's breast. Bella's breath caught in her throat and she gulped, but quickly regained her composure and leaned in quickly. Rosalie, distracted now by the feel of Bella's t-shirt-covered breast on her fingertips, didn't notice as Bella grinned mischievously and licked a wet path right up Rosalie's cheek. "Ew!" Rosalie shrieked, and Bella laughed so hard it startled a man walking by them enough that he spilled his beer. Bella quickly yanked her wrists free and grabbed Rosalie's while the advantage of shock was still on her side. She quickly mimicked Rosalie's earlier actions, holding her wrists behind her back, except she wasn't strong enough to hold both of the blondes with one hand and had to muster all of her power in both hands in order to keep the beautiful girl from breaking the hold. Rosalie could feel Bella straining to keep her pinned, and she decided to let her keep her advantage. She gave a dramatic sigh to signal defeat and lessened her squirming somewhat. Bella giggled in victory, her eyes shining as she tried her best to smirk smugly at Rosalie, and Rosalie couldn't help but giggle back as she thought how ridiculous Bella's smirking actually looked. Bella was still against the railing, and she pulled Rosalie into her as hard as she could while she leaned back into it. Rosalie continued to pretend to struggle, and Bella giggled as she watched Rosalie squirm in mock strain, unaware that it was a ruse. "Ah, Rosalie, payback's a bitch, isn't it?" She smiled flirtatiously as Rosalie continued to giggle and squirm, their faces only inches apart. "You licked my face." Rosalie tried to pout but found it impossible with Bella smiling at her so victoriously. Bella brought her lips to Rosalie's ear and tried to mirror Rosalie's own earlier moves, attempting to purr seductively as she replied, "I told you I had moves you didn't give me credit for." Rosalie muffled a loud giggle, as Bella did not do seductive purring very effectively either. But Rosalie found her attempt utterly charming, and she wasn't able to stifle the next giggle when she easily yanked her wrists free of Bella's grasp and quickly caught Bella by the waist. The look of confusion and disappointment on Bella's face was priceless, and Rosalie couldn't help but giggle even louder as she simultaneously brought the girl into a hug. Rosalie just couldn't help it. She was completely overwhelmed by the desire to embrace the beautiful, dark-eyed girl. "Rose, how did you break free so quickly? I totally had you, but were you fake?" Rosalie silenced her protests with a gentle kiss to her neck, and Bella quickly acquiesced and hugged Rosalie back. They embraced like a couple in love for years, even though they had only just kissed. But neither girl gave any thought to what the hug meant. They just held each other for almost a minute as Rosalie gently peppered the back of Bella's neck and shoulder with kisses, and Bella rubbed small circles on Rosalie's back and arms where her hands lay. Rosalie pulled back so that she could look at Bella, but both girls held on tightly from the chest down. When her eyes met Bella's, Rosalie smiled warmly. "You know, Bella, if I didn't give you credit for them before, let me tell you now." Bella grinned back at Rosalie. Rosalie leaned in and pecked her quickly, then looked deeply into her dark eyes. "I'm pretty happy with the moves you have." Rosalie smirked flirtatiously, and Bella couldn't help but blush and look down. "I don't think I want you coming up with any more new ones." Rosalie, thanks, but Bella bit her lip and Rosalie groaned inwardly. The girl was completely unaware of how seductive the unconscious action was. Bella met her eyes again, and they still sparkled, despite the obvious look of confusion her features belied. "I don't understand what you mean." She looked at Rosalie questioningly, and Rosalie's smirk grew wider. Bella looked so captivating in that moment. Her t-shirt somewhat rumpled by the day's activities, and her hair most certainly mussed by those same activities, so that small strands and wisps floated freely in the slight breeze that came off the ocean. Rosalie, though, it was like slight bedhead but 1,000 times sexier. Bella's lips were swollen and her creamy skin was offset by the redness of her lips and the flush in her cheeks. Rosalie could see a few tiny freckles forming on the bridge of her nose from their time in the sun, and her eyes shone in the lamplight of the boardwalk, bright and yet darker than Rosalie had ever seen them. To anyone watching, Rosalie's eyes must have looked much the same, bright and shining, but her brilliant greens had turned into dark agates. Her long blonde hair was shining and also blowing slightly in the breeze, and her lightly tanned skin looked healthy and flushed. Rosalie wasn't one to blush, and she never really looked red, even after vigorous exercise. Instead, she often had more of a pinkish glow to her. Tonight her cheeks had that pinkish glow and her skin shone like she just spent the weekend at a spa. Her polo was disheveled and unbuttoned all the way down to the middle of her chest so that her bikini showed through where her bra should have been. Bella had pushed her shirt up at the bottom enough so that an inch of golden skin showed above her waistline. Rosalie was startling to look at, and didn't notice that night how many men and women had stopped to stare at her as they passed her. But if you'd asked her that night, she would have been sure that they'd stopped to stare at Bella as well, because the girl looked more beautiful than Rosalie had ever seen her. Even now, as her expression was awash with confusion trying to decipher Rosalie's cryptic comment that she didn't want Bella to come up with any new tricks, and Rosalie's even more cryptic smirk that accompanied it, even now, Bella looked stunningly beautiful, and to Rosalie, achingly so. Bella bit her lower lip again and looked down, but only briefly, as Rosalie captured her face in one hand and lifted her chin with the other. She leaned in slightly in a motion to kiss Bella, and paused to let Bella close the distance, which she did immediately. Rosalie kissed her tenderly, running her thumbs over the delicate skin she found, and Bella did the same, wrapping her hands behind Rosalie's neck and rubbing it. Bella slowly ran her tongue across Rosalie's lower lip requesting entrance, and Rosalie parted her lips slowly. She took Bella's soft tongue into her mouth and sucked gently, tenderly. Bella tried to increase the intensity of the kiss, but Rosalie slowed her, wanting to keep this connection more innocent. Rosalie kissed Bella like she loved her, and Bella kissed her back the same way. The rhythm they found kissing in just that one day was more in sync and intense than either had ever experienced, and Rosalie used this kiss to show Bella what she was sure she could never tell her. Their tongues moved in slow, deliberate rhythms as their fingers did the same, but neither let them roam. They just continued to kiss and stroke each other, Rosalie stroking Bella's soft cheeks and Bella rubbing the nape of Rosalie's graceful neck. Rosalie pulled back after a while, and searched Bella's eyes while her fingers continued their ministrations. Bella, after her now usual groan of frustration whenever their lips parted, looked at Rosalie questioningly. "Rosalie," she husked, "what did you mean when you said the thing about the new tricks?" Rosalie smiled sweetly in response, and gave her one last soft kiss, before resting her forehead against Bella's. Bella kept her lips parted, eagerly awaiting another connection. "What I meant, Bella," Rosalie husked, "was that—" Bella exhaled, closing her eyes in anticipation, and then opening them widely as she felt Rosalie pull away. When she saw the huge smirk spreading across the blonde's beautiful features, she must have known she was in trouble. Rosalie grasped her face firmly, smirk still firmly in place, and Bella couldn't help but smile back as she watched Rosalie move in for the kill. "What I meant, my sweet little Bella," Rosalie taunted, "was that if this—" She darted in and ran a wet tongue sloppily up Bella's cheek. Bella shrieked and grabbed at her, but Rosalie jumped back quickly, laughing. "If this is one of your moves I'm not giving you credit for." Bella swatted at her and tried to lunge at her again, but Rosalie dodged. "Then I want you to know I think I'm happy with the moves I already know you have." With that, Rosalie darted in again, grabbed a squirming Bella firmly by the waist, and licked her even longer up the other side of her face, making sure to get as much slobber on her as she could. Bella was laughing hysterically as she shrieked and tried to wipe her cheek on Rosalie's polo. "Not on the shirt." Rosalie cried as she jumped away from Bella, and Bella chased after her, tongue out, desperately seeking revenge. Rosalie was quicker though, and laughed as she deflected another swat from the little brunette. "You are so dead, Rose. I'm going to slobber all over your stupid polo." Bella managed to grab her arm and pull Rosalie in long enough to get just a hint of her pink tongue on the material. "Bella," Rosalie gasped in mock horror, "that's collection." "I don't know what that means, Rose, but it tastes delicious." Bella lunged again, tongue out, and Rosalie twisted and maneuvered so that she caught Bella in a bear hug from behind. Bella squeezed her eyes shut in anticipation of her punishment, and was shocked when instead of a wet tongue she felt Rosalie's firm hot lips on the side of her own. Rosalie kissed her hard and fast, and then moved quickly to her ear, nipping the lobe with a growl. "Tag." Rosalie husked between teeth closed gently around the soft flesh. She then darted back around to Bella's lip and pecked her. "You're it." And with that Rosalie took off, sprinting down the boardwalk towards the subway, with Bella hot on her heels. They continued like that all the way back to the subway. Pushing, teasing, running and chasing each other, grabbing, kissing passionately. Bella was intoxicating. Rosalie was sure some of her inhibitions had been lowered by the shots earlier during the day, but this playful, teasing, coy then aggressive Bella Rosalie somehow doubted that this was simply a byproduct of some cloyingly sweet alcohol consumption. They were together amidst a sea of strangers, in a strange place. They knew nobody, they cared for nothing but each other, nothing but touching each other. Bella's eyes were so alive, sparkling as she'd pull Rosalie in for a kiss, pressing her against a lamppost, or parked car, or a bench. Rosalie was equally alive, eyes shining, bronzed skin glowing as she wrapped Bella into her, relishing in the feel of the smaller girl's hands all over her. And over her they were. Bella seemed transfixed by Rosalie's body at times, tracing the grooves of her stomach muscles, trailing fingers down her arms, rubbing every exposed, lean muscle she could find. Bella could not keep her hands off of Rosalie literally for the entire trip back. On the train they snaked around Rosalie's waist from behind, trailing along her pelvic bones and up to her rib cage, roaming under Rosalie's shirt. This must be what puppy love feels like. Rosalie thought she felt like a young teen, full of laughter and mirth and arousal and need. She knew the night would end soon enough, but she wanted to capture as much of it as possible. Their playful kissing and teasing continued all the way until they turned the corner to their block. Rosalie stiffened, feeling reality impending only a few buildings away. She dropped Bella's hand, but Bella ignored her sudden change of emotion and recaptured it instantly, pulling Rosalie toward their building. As they reached the entrance, she pushed Rosalie against a parked car and cupped her face, leaning in. "What are you doing?" Rosalie hissed, but did not break the embrace. Bella pressed their lips together and released, whispering breathlessly. "Kissing you." Bella, stop. What if someone sees? She was cut off by a pair of urgent lips, and she couldn't help but moan as she felt a hot tongue requesting entry. Rosalie kissed Bella deeply and returned deeply but quickly, pulling back for air and resting her forehead against Bella's after a few short seconds. "I don't care, Rose. I don't care. I'd rather die than stop kissing you." It was Bella's turn to escape reality. Rosalie clung to Bella's back to keep steady, feeling so completely out of control but unable to stop or refuse her as Bella's tongue found its way back. She was so soft, her lips so warm and wet, and the taste of citrus and mint laced with a hint of alcohol was something Rosalie doubted she could ever forget. The slam of a door ended her revelry. Rosalie shot to attention and quickly yanked Bella through the main doors of the structure. They were both silent as she walked Bella to her door, until arriving at its threshold, where sudden giggles from Bella interrupted the tension. "What?" Rosalie smirked, looking down at the smaller girl, who was playing with the hem of Rosalie's polo. "Yo," Bella chided, giggling and keeping her eyes glued to the shirt hem. "Yo called me your girlfriend earlier." She looked up at Rosalie, partially lidded orbs taking on a more serious gaze. But Bella had unwittingly pushed it too far, tripped over the tenuous, invisible trigger wire that Rosalie had set. The boundary line she'd drawn in the sand to protect herself. Rosalie's internal controls returned to her in an instant, and her warped take on reality set in. Bella would never be hers. Rosalie would ruin it. Rosalie would hurt her. Or, Rosalie had to acknowledge, Bella would ruin her. Bella would hurt her. As much as Rosalie hated to entertain the notion that anyone could hurt her, she knew after tonight that Bella could. And Bella had a boyfriend. And Bella wasn't afraid of Rosalie. Instead, she was confident and cocky, and she teased her. She just teased her about calling Bella her girlfriend. As if anyone would ever be so arrogant as to assume that. Yes, Bella could hurt her. Bella would hurt her. So as Bella looked back up at her seriously, Rosalie ignored her gaze, instead throwing her gorgeous head back in laughter, running her slender, perfectly manicured hands through long, flowing icy blonde locks. This girl would never be able to hurt her. "My Bella," she teased right back, although a very well-trained ear would have recognized just the slightest trace of spite in her tone. "Someone has a big head now, don't they?" She pinched Bella's sides, trying to distract Bella from the hurt she could now see plainly in Bella's eyes. Rosalie liked the girl, she did. She liked her a lot, and the night had been beyond compare. But this Bella had no right to put Rosalie in a position like this, directly, in Rosalie's mind. Implying that she needed Bella, basically shouting out that she knew Rosalie was weak. "Bella," she leaned in predatorily to Bella's ear, and spoke huskily and low. "I'm so sorry, but I only called you my girlfriend for dramatic effect." She could feel Bella's body stiffening, those soft, addictive limbs growing rigid with each passing millisecond, and Rosalie smiled, knowing that she was gaining control back, recovering what she realized was lost ground and putting this girl in her place. She breathed heavily and hot in Bella's ear, "Don't do girlfriends, ever." With that she swiftly kissed the girl on the nose and winked before turning on her heels and gliding gracefully to her own door, not 20 feet away. When she got to the knob she slid the key in effortlessly and, knowing that Bella's eyes had been on her the entire time, glanced back over to her, her face a mixture of sex and detachment. The girl's mouth was hanging open, she looked utterly shell-shocked. Rosalie flashed her a winning smile, actually, it was more of a winning smirk, and spoke calmly, as if not a single part of the night's events had ever actually transpired. Good night, Bella. That's for today, guys. If I got 500 plus views and 15 plus comments on this video, I'll upload another part of the same story. Don't forget to drop your reviews in comment section.